Okay, it's just past 12:30. I see we have three subcommittee members here, so we can go. We do have a quorum. And my name is Doug Thomas. I'm the chair of the subcommittee for the HB 1644. We now have four subcommittee members here. That's okay. But we do have a time constraint, so we have to continue. We had a subcommittee meeting last week. We had additional information that were exchanged. And since we went so long last week, we reserved a very short time today, basically for our subcommittee to take a vote on the recommendation to our full committee. However, we do have, my understanding is that we have two speakers here, or will have, that came here specially. I know they'll be testifying during the public hearing scheduled for 1 o'clock, but I will give them the courtesy to come here and speak for no more than 5 minutes on perhaps something that they may want to expand upon when they go to public hearing. So in order to facilitate this, if I have a pink card, I guess, so I just have their name and where they're from, whoever is going to be speaking during the public hearing and I don't know their name, I'm sorry. Simon, do you have a name? Sure. And then let me just look at it, and then I will give to Nick. Hang on. Is that Swanson? Okay, give it to Nick. That's for the public. That's for the subcommittee records, Nick. So if Mr. Swanson would like to come up and address the subcommittee, please do. You have 5 minutes.
Test this first. Am I okay with you?
You have to get closer.
A little bit closer? How's that sound?
Yeah.
All right,
You can pull the mic closer to you, too.
Sorry about the noise.
And just state your name and who you represent.
My name is Eric Swanson. I've been asked by CTIA to come and talk to you today. So, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the subcommittee. I've been asked to talk to you about health and safety aspects of 5G technology. First, a few words about myself. I'm a physicist at the University of Pittsburgh. I'm a fellow of the American Physical Society, and I'm a member of the Union of Concerned Scientists. The opinion that I'm going to tell you today is a consensus view of the scientific view of the safety of 5G technology. As you know, 5G and cell phones work with electromagnetic waves. These waves are sometimes also called radiation, which I want to stress is not nuclear radiation. The waves in totality are called the spectrum. Some parts of the spectrum are actually dangerous. That's in the high frequency or high energy end of the electromagnetic spectrum. And you're familiar with some of this. X-rays, for instance, are electromagnetic waves. They're high energy. And you don't want to expose yourself to X-rays too much. That's why the technician leaves the room when you get your teeth X-rayed, things like that. If you go up to even higher frequencies, you get to things like gamma rays, which are very rare in nature, but they can outright kill you, unlike in the movies. If you go to lower frequencies, you get to things like ultraviolet radiation. So ultraviolet forms part of the natural light that's emitted by the sun. And you are well aware that if you spend too long out in the sun, you'll tan. Your skin responds to this energetic incoming waves by tanning. And if you stay out too long, you might put yourself at risk of skin cancer. Now, things change dramatically just below the frequency of ultraviolet radiation. That's where visible light comes in, so it's exactly the light in this room. Visible light is below what's called the ionization threshold. This is like a step function. Things change dramatically once you go from UV radiation to visible light and below. Now, non-ionizing radiation does not cause things like skin cancer. it acts completely differently when it comes in contact with tissue. And you're actually aware of this at an intuitive level already. You know that you can spend all day inside underneath these lights. You're not going to get tan. You're certainly not going to get skin cancer. It doesn't matter how long you stay underneath these lights. The reason is that the frequency and the energy emitted by these lights is below the ionization threshold. By the way, this was first understood in 1905 by good old Albert Einstein. He's the one who first explained all this. So the technology that we're talking about, 5G, is higher in frequency than the older technology, 4G, but it is still a factor of 30,000 below this threshold. And I stress, again, that it's a threshold. So even if you were a factor of 2 below the threshold, it would still be perfectly safe. Now, this radiation doesn't do nothing. It does have an effect on materials. The primary effect is that it moves things around. It moves molecules, moves electrons around. And that slow motion is well known to us as heat. So if, for example, you were to step out into the sun, you would feel heat on your skin. And this is exactly the effect that we're talking about. In fact, the FCC could regulate the sun if it chose to. It operates at a much higher frequency than 5G technology. And it violates FCC regulations, by the way. The sun would have to be outlawed by about a factor of 16. So the FCC regulates this because we can't see it, and so our eyes don't detect radio waves, so they regulate it for us. The idea is that people shouldn't be exposed to too much of a heating effect. So what they do, they don't conduct experiments. That's something of a myth. They consult with national bodies and international bodies. Thousands of experiments get examined. They are continually reviewing experiments as they come up. They recently completed a review of new technology of about 200 studies just in the past few months. What they do is they set limits about a factor of 50 below anything that's remotely detectable in these experiments. Now, I could tell you what these limits are, but it's just a number, so what I'd rather do is illustrate what these limits are. So to do that, I want to talk about my brain for a minute. So my brain uses about 15% of the energy that my body consumes every day. It's about 2,000 calories a day. That actually works out to 100 watts. So, you know, a human is very much, in terms of energy, like an old-fashioned incandescent light bulb. 15% of that is 15 watts. My brain weighs about 2 pounds, something like that. And what that means is that my brain is operating at a power rating of 15 watts per kilogram. Now, because it's warm, it's at room temperature right now, the molecules in my brain are jiggling around. And when they jiggle around, they actually emit electromagnetic radiation. It's not 5G and it's not visible. It's in between. It's called infrared radiation or thermal radiation. You've probably seen it on, you know, James Bond movies or things like this. When they
Excuse me, Mr. Swanson, you have like 1 minute.
Okay,
Please sum up.
Thank you. And that means that my brain and all of our brains are thermal radio transmitters. They violate the FCC regulations if the FCC chose to regulate brains by about a factor of 10. So the message I'm trying to get across to you is that these regulations are extremely strict. They are very safe. To summarize, although the technology of 5G is new, the physics of 5G is the same as it's always been as 4G and 3G and 2G. And the biology is the same. And the FCC regulates this technology completely adequately. There's nothing to fear from it. Thank you for your attention. I'm happy to answer questions, of course.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. If anyone feels the need to answer a question on the subcommittee, we can, or we will be having a public hearing in a few minutes where Mr. Swanson will have an opportunity to go into a little more detail. So that being said, thank you for your time, Mr. Swanson. And is there one more person? We can have time for one more speaker. Could you bring the pink card over to me so I know your name, and then I'll give it to our subcommittee clerk, Representative White. Oh, you have it? Mr. Hancock, is it? Yes. Okay. Welcome, Mr. Hancock. You are representing yourself, it says here.
Yes.
And so go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
So my expertise, I worked with Northern Telecom back when Canada. I work with Secret Service with microwave transmissions across the northern border of the United States, southern border of Canada, and I helped design a lot of the systems that are used today. This bill came to my attention because of Rep. Nadir, and I was quite honestly shocked at the misinformation committee's findings. First of all, sorry, there we go.
Excuse me, I hate to interrupt you. I was under the impression that the other speaker we had here was, is this your speaker, Representative Dotter? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead.
So first of all, 5G is an encoding standard. It's being used by everybody as a marketing standard, but it's an encoding standard, and it's only a slight modification and improvement on 4G. In fact, it's basically where 4G ended up, and they just renamed it and made a new standard for it. The key, and I think the sole concern with this board here, is that frequency, i.e. how fast the wave moves, and how much power that wave has. But as I just heard, the handset actually produces more radiation at the head than the towers do. And frequencies that are used by cellular service and are about to be put into use in cellular service. And in fact, the amount of radiation produced by these cell phone towers, and even your handset, is orders of magnitude less than what came before. So as an example, T-Mobile has 5G throughout the state of New Hampshire already. AT&T, Verizon also do. Well, in case of T-Mobile, their cell phone service for 5G is almost exclusively in television channels that less than 5 years ago were broadcasting at 50,000 watts in this state right now. I live in the Keene area. There was 2 towers that had to be reassigned and reallocated and new transmitters put up. Both of those were over 25,000 watts to be replaced by cell phone towers that broadcast at 100 watts in the same frequency. So as a result of this technology, not only has it gotten safer, not only do we have more technology in the state, have more communication and more opportunity as a result of this technology coming into play, we actually are producing less radiation. And as is noted in multiple testimonies that I've seen, it's called the inverse square law. So for every meter you go from a tower, the power drops off. And power is directly equatable to how deep the wave will penetrate the skin. So as a result, if you've got 50,000 watts and you have 100 watts, and they're roughly the same place, because yes, a lot of the cell phone towers are actually on radio towers and television towers on exactly the same frequency, the cell phone tower is vastly safer for everybody involved. If we go and look at the new frequencies like C-band that everybody's concerned about because of bad airplanes that were designed poorly and have poor insulation, the interference is because they didn't insulate anything. But those same frequencies were broadcasting at 50 to 190,000 watts off of satellites that you can see today the remnants of what it used to be used for because of all the 6-foot dishes that are still left in people's yards. But those were broadcasting at thousands of times more power than the cell phone towers are. Okay? Even millimeter wave today, right now, as we speak, there's 250,000 watts of millimeter down simply to tell us that there's a snowstorm coming. Because the same frequencies that they're talking about using for millimeter wave, of which there's no implementation in New Hampshire and very little reason to believe that it will be widespread because of the characteristics of it, it's everywhere. Starlink satellite, that if you were to pass this legislation, would be absolutely subject to this. It's in exactly the millimeter wave frequencies, and you're going to cut off high-speed internet access to the vast majority of the state as a result, because there's no other feasible way to provide broadband to all of Coast County, as an example.
Mr. Hancock, excuse me, you have 1 minute to summarize, please.
So as a result, exactly like what happened with the EPA when they passed legislation to control nuclear reactors and fuel refineries, and the consequence of their good intentions, the consequence is that because of the regulations they passed, we actually pollute vastly more now in the United States than any other country in the world because of those very legislations, because those reactors, those refineries have not been upgraded. The same pathway has occurred and will continue to occur when it comes to electromagnetic frequencies, because if you block this, you're blocking new towers, new developments, lower power, better frequencies, closer signals that are of lower power and don't need to broadcast so strongly as a result of this. So all that will remain is the old legacy technology.
Thank you so much
Thank
for your
you.
testimony. I will remind everyone that there will be time at the public hearing to speak a little more in depth on this. Again, I only allowed these two speakers out of courtesy because they had traveled some distance to get here today, and 1 o'clock. At this point, I just want to say that the subcommittee, in some talking, feels that we've heard testimony pretty strongly on both sides of the fence, and it's very complex. Unfortunately, this is an early bill. We would have liked to have been able to put together an amendment to make it more palatable. That's something that could have been used, but time won't allow us. I believe because of this, and because we believe that there is something out there, we do understand there are some medical issues with the public that cannot be denied. We also believe that there's heavy scientific evidence that would point to the contrary to causation, but we do realize that there might be some correlation out there. We just really, we just don't have enough time to figure out what we should do about it. So I believe the subcommittee is in a position to make a motion of recommendation to the full committee, and although I haven't assigned anyone that yet, Representative White, would you make a motion? I believe interim study would be the best course of action. Are you willing to make a motion to that?
I will. I just want to say that I've struggled a lot personally with this. I've gone back and forth on this. I have not had the time. I've only got about halfway through the 400-page commission report, and I think one study, which there's thousands out there to look at. But yes, I'll entertain that motion to move this to interim study, noting that I have concerns about this.
Motion's been made for interim study. Is there a second? Representative Partial.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion for interim study? Yes, Representative Partial.
Yes, before us, we have an amendment to the original bill. It does define more clearly what we do mean by antenna. I understand there's still continuing concerns about that. And also removes the registry as being, well, that could be problematic at this time. So we just wanted to focus on the actual placement of the towers. There's concern from ham radio operators, which may dictate the necessity for a further amendment. I think it's something worth talking about. I think it's definitely worth keeping this bill alive. There are a lot of questions around this. And I would prefer seeing this an OTPA bill because, in effect, that will put a moratorium on the deployment of these towers until we can more fully understand the repercussions of what we may be doing. Without that moratorium, I think that it's giving a green light to the industry when there's a lot of questions remaining unanswered. I love the idea of an interim study. I think this is an important issue. I think a lot of homework has been done already. And I hope we can actually vote against the interim study though at this time and give this an OTPA so that we can buy the time to actually study this free from having it deployed.
Okay, my understanding is that you've seconded the motion for interim study for the subcommittee.
Can I not do that?
Is that?
Oh, then maybe I better not do that. I'm very sorry. Matter of convenience.
Representative Otter.
I'll second the motion to interim study.
Okay. Vote's been seconded for interim study. I may remind the study committee that the subject of the amendment, and Representative Parsons' comments can certainly be made during the public hearing, and also when we go to executive session, when we actually do vote on interim study, those comments can be made at that time, and your comments can be duly noted. So with that being said,
Thank you for your education.
sure. And seeing that there are 4 members of our committee here, Mr. Clerk, Mr. Representative White, would you call the vote for those in favor of interim study for the subcommittee recommendation to the full committee?
Yes, so what do I need? I'm just calling the vote.
Call the roll call.
Okay. Representative Thomas.
I'm last.
Oh, you're last. My Representative Nodder.
Yes.
Representative White, yes. Representative Partial,
Or say no.
no. And Representative Callie Pitts is not here, correct?
Here. So me?
And Representative Thomas.
Yes. So apparently a vote of 3 to 1, the subcommittee is recommending interim study to the full committee, which will be presented at the executive session later on this afternoon. With that being said, I have no further comments. I'm going to adjourn the subcommittee and prepare for the public hearing for 1644 with Chairman Vose. Thank you. And thank you all for coming here. Welcome to have your comments at 1 o'clock.
I would like to call to order this session of the House Science, Technology, and Energy Committee. I request that everybody take your seat. Before we open the public hearing, the resumption of the public hearing on House Bill 1644, I'd ask you all to rise and join Representative Lex Berezhny as he leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I would like to now resume the public hearing on House Bill 1644, which was recessed 2 weeks ago. I'm going to be holding this resumed committee meeting, public hearing, until 1:59 p.m. At 2 o'clock, this committee is scheduled to go into executive session on 5 early bills. So far, I have 5 pink cards of people who would like to testify at this resumed public hearing. If there are any persons in the room who wanted to testify on this bill but have not submitted a pink card, you must do so in order to testify. Because we have 5 pink cards now and may get more later, I'm going to restrict everybody who testifies to 5 minutes of actual testimony, followed by whatever questions the committee might seek to ask. We're going to try to keep each person down to a total of 10 minutes so that we can get through all this. So with that, I will call on the first person to testify for us today, and that is Mark Doyle of the Department of Safety. Mr. Doyle.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I want to take the opportunity to thank you for having me speak today and speak specifically to the public safety perspective of the impact of this bill. You won't be hearing from me relative to any of the science or the impact on the Business and Industry Association, but I think it's prudent that you folks hear from the public safety perspective of what kind of impact the passage of this bill will have. Currently, as written, this bill would jeopardize our ability to provide emergency communications for the Department of Safety and our statewide public safety partners in the community that they serves, as it would adversely affect antenna placement for radio communications, specifically for our statewide public safety first responders who rely on and depend upon robust, reliable, and redundant communications capabilities. This would adversely affect new construction designed to enhance coverage throughout the state to include land mobile radio, or LMR, and LTE and cellular network technologies and networks. It would also adversely impact the future capabilities to include leveraging the integration of land mobile radio with cellular and LTE technologies. For example, push-to-talk integration as well as land mobile radio over the LTE network. These are all capabilities that currently exist and that are being used around the state. It would also impact and adversely impact the fulfillment of the Governor's Task Force on School Safety recommendation that our division has been charged with at the Division of Emergency Services and Communications. As the director, I'm directly responsible for overseeing the implementation of those recommendations that have been put forth by the Director of Homeland Security and Emergency Management and compiled for the Governor to review and approve. That recommendation specifically speaks to enhancing radio or cellular coverage for emergency communications, including the placement of cell boosters and antennas in and around and on top of schools, near school buildings, to enhance the response from an emergency first responder perspective. We've also explored many opportunities with regards to leveraging available technologies to enhance public safety communications throughout this state, be it existing LMR networks, public safety communications, or the current future capabilities of technologies such as FirstNet. This bill would constrain our ability to have reliable and interoperable communications for our first responders, especially during an integrated disaster response. Currently, AT&T FirstNet is on a current schedule for build-out in the state of New Hampshire and are planning for the next 5 years of expansion, which includes antenna placement on existing and newly constructed towers for the National Public Safety Broadband Network, which is nationwide. This technology currently intends to continue to provide prioritized voice and data traffic for our first responder community in times of disaster or recovery, as well as a number of integrated emergency management and first responder applications available only to FirstNet subscribers. There are approximately right now in this state about 200 agencies statewide on that FirstNet platform now, with thousands of individual FirstNet subscribers, all reliant upon the capabilities and interoperability that FirstNet provides, more of which will continue to enhance and grow our ability to continue to provide and provision emergency communications across the state to our first responder partners. This is also going to potentially affect our ability to have calls provisioned to the 911 call center as we oversee the 911 system in the state. Because about right now, 80% of our call volume in the 911 center is from existing cellular networks and cellular service subscribers. About 9% is based on landline, and that landline number continues to drop while the number of cellular subscribers and cellular call traffic to the 911 center continues to increase. Because of the topography associated with the state of New Hampshire, most of you know it's not a flat state. We rely explicitly, especially when it comes to wilderness response, and for some of those less than better served areas of the state where cellular or broadband connectivity exists, we rely on the cellular networks for folks to be able to reach out to us to get the help that they need when they need it, so that the mission of the 911 center is accomplished, to locate, communicate, and connect people in an emergency with the help that they need by whatever technologies exist.
30 seconds, please.
That pretty much wraps up what I had to plan to speak to you relative to the impact that this bill potentially would have on our first responder community, as well as our ability to continue to provide and leverage emergency communications. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. I expect that you'll entertain questions.
I certainly will.
The chair recognizes Representative Thomas for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. Am I to understand that your comments involving this bill, are they related to the ambiguous wording referencing towers in general and whatnot, or are your comments directly related to whatever technology would be prevented for proceeding to 5G capability?
Thank you for your question, and I think it's a little bit of both. It's ambiguous to the degree that nobody's really nailed down what the term telecommunications antenna mean. It could broadly be defined as radio communications as well. The technologies that you speak to are important to kind of consider as well, because we're using, and I say we collectively at the Department of Safety, as well as the first responders that are in your communities right now, are using a number of technologies that include LTE coverage, but also include the ability to integrate LTE and the radio communication systems that they currently use. So that when we have gaps in coverage in and around the state, we all know that radio isn't a perfect solution, and we all know that LTE isn't a perfect solution when it comes to communications because there are dead spots. However, when your ability exists, and we currently have that ability right now, and it's being used in some sections of the state, to integrate the two, it broadly covers a large swath of areas that wouldn't otherwise be served in those underserved areas. So to your point, this bill would impact our ability to continue to use those resources and expand upon them if, in fact, it went and passed.
Follow-up?
Follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the follow-up. So, in other words, if we were to just keep the way it is right now, that is using what would be considered 4G technology, for lack of a better term, that there would be gaps in the system that the 5G technology would be able to fill?
No, I can't speak too much to what the coverage disparity, if there is, between what the 4G cellular network provides and what the 5G cellular network can provide. I can speak to this, though, that the 5G network, as I understand it, is used as a technology to augment the ability to provision a lot of data across the cellular network. We're using a lot of voice, but what first responders are looking for right now is the ability to get that data to them in the field. The 5G signal, as I understand it, is able to provision that data far more expeditiously and far more efficiently so that the first responders of the community can get that versus the 4G network that's currently out there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Platt is recognized for a question.
Yes, you had written testimony you were reading from. I captured 1/10 of what you said. Could you submit that, please?
I've provided to Representative Notter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Further questions for Mr. Doyle? Representative McGee is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Doyle, for taking my question. I was making notes as you were speaking, and you mentioned 200 agencies that are currently working with the first, and thousands of FirstNet subscribers. So I'm assuming your reference is to first responders. Is that what you're talking about there?
Thank you for your question. Let me clarify. When we talk about FirstNet, FirstNet is part of the National Public Safety Broadband Network initiative that was put forth several years ago that every state has opted in to use. And when I talk about the National Public Safety Broadband Network, it is exactly what that is defined as. It's a broadband network that's designed specifically for public safety and first responders to use in times of crisis. Long story short, it came as a result of the 9/11 commission that investigated what went wrong with a multi-agency integrated response to a disaster and the interoperability issues and the logjam associated with communications networks during the course of that response. Again, long story short, they've come a long way to recommend that what should be in place is a dedicated pipeline of communications availability of first responders so that when the networks get clogged, that pipeline will continue to exist. When they decided that that was going to happen, the FCC awarded the FirstNet project to AT&T. AT&T has that across the country for all 50 states and the territories that are on board with the FirstNet platform. What they're designed and been charged to do is over the next few years, in 5-year increments, is work within the states, and they're working with our division to make sure that the scaling out of that program and that project done in such a way that it's going to meet certain metrics that AT&T has been had their feet held to by the FCC when it comes to the FirstNet project. Now, they don't do it unilaterally. They make this decision based upon coverage, they based upon geography, they base it upon population, the number of first responders in a particular state. What they've done with New Hampshire, though, is work very closely with the statewide interoperability executive committee in the state to identify where those gaps exist so that first responders in and around the state, not just in the rural areas and not just in the urban areas, have the ability to leverage that communications platform. That's been going on for the better part of the last 5 years, and they're right now in the second phase of that to plan for the following 5 years, which includes building out on existing towers as well as identifying areas within the state that need that coverage because the first responders have asked for it in those areas that are currently underserved.
Thank you. Can
Before
have
I
a follow-
recommend the member for a follow-up, could I ask that you make your answers as succinct as possible, as we have a limited amount of time? Follow up, Representative McGee.
Thank you so much. The other question I had is we've received some notes from ham radio operators, and you mentioned radio. I don't really understand how that is affected by this, and I mean, I know what I read from what people asked, but I guess I would ask you how you view that. They spoke to us in terms of the security they might provide in an event where something went wrong. They think that that's part of their charge is having this extra communication level, and I don't know a lot about that world, so I just wonder how that feeds into this.
Thank you for your question, and I'll try to constrain it in such a way that I'm staying within the timelines. But the ham radio, amateur radio operators in this state, like they are in many other states, are partnering closely with public safety. And in New Hampshire, they are part of what we call the Emergency Services Function, ESF2, when the State Emergency Operations Center is open. In the event that we need to utilize their services, because sometimes you may have to have them come on board, and we've used them during certain exercises, to leverage the ability for them to be able to communicate on a different radio network altogether. And it may impact them based upon how the wording is defined, whether they can erect or construct new construction when it comes to putting up their own antennas around the state.
Okay.
Thank you. Representative Somcich is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Doyle. I understand from what you're saying, your concerns about the lack of opportunities that may be closed off by this bill to some of the services. However, right now, you're already providing these services without 5G. So it's not like all these services couldn't happen unless 5G is there. And this bill is focusing on some of the claimed negative effects of 5G. So a lot of the people in New Hampshire have some concerns and worries. And it seems to me we should take those seriously. There's always a way of working around technology to give you the same result as another
Question,
technology.
please.
Yeah. So would you share the concerns that people might have to know that before you implement technology like this, they need to know that it's safe for them?
I can speak to when you spoke about 5G technology, and again, I want to make sure that the conversation I'm having with you is framed in such a way that it's not science specific, that I've heard a lot of testimony about the science and how 5G will or will not impact an individual or affect an individual per se. However, I can tell you this, that we're utilizing existing technologies now, whether 5G is there or not, those technologies will continue to be using. I don't know if this bill restricts the placement or erection or construction of antennas because they're 5G or not, or if it's all or nothing.
Thank you. Representative Callie Pitts is recognized for a question.
I can't reach my button. My concern is that the bill that we are contemplating is more or less on the proliferation of towers, no matter what's connected to them. And I have some expertise in the interoperability situation because of the Sheriff's Department and our emergency response. Do you believe that proliferation of towers, small towers within a small radius of each other, or large towers within a small radius, is better for the service than what I would consider fiber optics? Do you believe that those towers in close proximity to each other and in close proximity to certain sensitive places would enhance our speed of and eliminate the dead zones?
That's a hard question to answer because
I can wait on it.
well, I'll give you the best answer that I can. How's that? I can tell you this, that when we decide, and only the Department of Safety decide to look at areas in which we need to provide coverage for our own usage, not for the individual communities that are out there that are using radio networks for their own purposes. We look at a number of things and we try to make the best decision based upon available technologies as well as with the infrastructure that we have to build to put it in place. And sometimes that means the availability of high-speed fiber optic, or does it make better sense to put in a microwave system that actually allows us to get that radio communications up and maybe quicker for less expense to provide to our public safety officials and officers that are out on the street the ability to communicate back to us? Really, the answer is it depends. It depends on a number of things, including all the things I just spoke to. Does that answer your question?
May I respond?
Go ahead, respond.
Somewhat, but I'm concerned about the security of some of these places, having had a flat tire in a dead zone in Dover years ago. What do you believe that a new system and a new system of towers can do that fiber optics cannot do? And do you believe it's essential?
And that's a great question, and that question I think I can answer, and thank you for it. We live in a state that has a lot of urban areas that are covered with a lot of coverage, whether it's broadband, whether it's fiber optic, whether it's cellular connectivity. And then we live in a state that has a vast section of area, geography-wise, that's not covered with that because it's impractical from a business standpoint to lay out fiber optic throughout the North Country, out in the western part of the state where it's just not practical to do. However, when it comes to an emergency response, the emergency response is not contingent upon whether that should be in place or not. It's contingent upon whether it is in place or not. When we talk about cellular connectivity and LTE and radio, we're looking to cross that span of those areas that don't have broadband connectivity, where people can't go to the wall and pick up a phone or reach for their cell phone and know they're going to have a signal because they live in an urban area of the state. In those areas where we do a lot of wilderness rescues, and if you're paying attention to the news, you're seeing a lot of that happen now, people are dependent upon that cellular device that they have, whether they should be or not. They get stuck and then they're in a jam on the side of a mountain someplace in bad weather. They want to know that they've got a cellular connection. It's not going to happen everywhere, but they're not going to have fiber optic up the side of a mountain to connect to either.
Okay, Mr. Doyle, we really appreciate your testimony. Thank you for coming in this afternoon. We've got 6 more folks we want to hear from in the next 40 minutes. So I would like to call now on Cecilia Doucette of Ashland, New Hampshire. And Ms. Doucette, you're going to have 3 minutes. And I would remind you that we've already heard testimony about the technology of 5G. We've heard testimony about the potential health effects that some people feel. If you can add new information to what we've already been told, that would be appreciated. So you have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Thank you. My name is Cecilia Doucette, and I am the Director of Massachusetts for Safe Technology and the international nonprofit Wireless Education. I helped Ashland Public Schools in Massachusetts become the first in the nation to take precautions with wireless technology. I have also worked on several bills in Massachusetts and in other states. As the pandemic taught us, we need to be vigilant about invisible toxins. Science indicates we should be at 0.1 microwatts per square meter in our sleeping areas and no more than 1,000 outdoors. This one cell phone that I'm going to turn in, first I'll give you an ambient reading of just everybody's devices and the wireless access points that are mounted throughout the building. So I've just, and the ambient was at 3,700. But look what happens now when I have turned my cell phone on and I'm not even doing anything. This is just the cell phone going, here I am, where are you? Here I am, where are you? To the cell towers. And we are at 458,000 microwatts per square meter. And we need to be at 0.1 in our sleeping areas. So this is the gravity of what we are doing here today. Indoors, all we need to do, who knew? You can buy a little adapter, hook up to an Ethernet cable, and you can plug your cell phone in here to access the internet. $20 for an adapter. When we allow any kind of close-range cell antennas or allow toxic utility smart meters on our homes, there is no escape, there is no sleep sanctuary, and the cumulative damage begins to mount. New Hampshire's groundbreaking majority report is from highly qualified doctors, scientists, engineers, and legislators. They have documented for you the science and the conflicts of interest with our captured federal agencies. This is all in the report. The meat of the report is in the first 17 pages, so if you haven't read it yet, you will get the summary and 15 recommendations in those first 17 pages. I hope everybody has read this by now. In my earlier emails to you and contributions to the subcommittee meeting on January 31st,
30 seconds.
I debunked much of the disinformation provided in the minority report that starts on page 18. We can have excellent technology and close the digital divide, but only with future-proof, high-speed cable or fiber to and through the premises with responsibly sited cellular microwave systems for emergencies. The FCC already, or I'm sorry, the CDC already has the ALARA principle, which means as low as reasonably achievable. And as Dr. Swanson mentioned, that's for X-rays, gamma rays, and the sun. We need to apply ALARA now that we know just how toxic microwave radiation is at the non-thermal level.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Do we have questions for Ms. Doucette? Representative White has a question.
Thank you. You mentioned 0.1 microwatts for sleeping locations. What's that based on?
That's based on this compendium called the Bioinitiative Report, which has literally hundreds, if not thousands, of peer-reviewed published scientific literature. And it was done with 14 international experts who are experts in the biological effects. We need to get away from listening to engineers and physicists and technologists when we set biological safety limits. We need to listen to the peer-reviewed independent science.
Representative Callie Pitts is recognized for a question.
I'm really sorry that is there any, to your knowledge, is there any adverse effect on medical equipment from close proximity to these microwaves? I remember years ago when microwave ovens first came out, big warnings all over the place. If you have a pacemaker, don't go near it. I just wondered if that has changed or if there's more data on that, to your knowledge.
That has not changed. It is a cause of interference.
Follow up?
So on medical equipment like pacemakers, oxygen tents, different things, especially near hospitals or in private homes, would it still perhaps have an effect?
It can.
Representative Notter is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking the question. Have any 5G bills passed in Massachusetts?
We have not had a 5G bill pass in Massachusetts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Doucette, seeing no further questions, we thank you very much for your testimony, and we now call on James Hancock of West Chesterfield, New Hampshire. Mr. Hancock, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hi there. I uniquely straddle both the engineering side and the medical side of this debate. As one of the leaders at Northern Telecom building 2G back in the 1990s that resulted in almost all the base stations for 2G in both the United States and Canada, and as the creator of the PopMedNet system that is the backbone for all distributed epidemiology in the United States and 23 other countries. So I am uniquely qualified to talk about the statistics and the probabilities of problems to do with this and the engineering consequences of this. So just to give an example right now, people have asked specific questions, and I think it's best of my time to actually answer some questions. What is 5G? Well, 5G is literally Wi-Fi 6. There's literally no difference between Wi-Fi with the latest version and 5G. There's none. They're identical standards. There's no difference. That's number one. Number two, 5G is 15 to 20% more efficient than 4G over the same frequency, over the same megahertz. It is simply a more efficient encoding standard. It is not in any way unique. And these waves are used everywhere. In fact, if you take that device and go and hold it over a cable television cable, you will get exactly the same interference with exactly the same waveform as you do for 5G and Wi-Fi, because they both use exactly the same protocol. All three of them do. Okay? In fact, if we hold that device in front of an LED light bulb, you will get similar rates of radiation. If you hold it near an electrical socket, you'll get similar rates of radiation. The key is that it's different frequencies. But the key with frequency is the higher the frequency, the less it goes through a wall. In fact, what the committee, I believe, is actually worried about is what's called millimeter wave. It's high frequency, 12 gigahertz to about 80 gigahertz. Well, if you've got a car that has collision avoidance, you're broadcasting all the time at significantly higher wattage than all millimeter wave broadcasts in 5G. Okay? If you have a television set you are that is less than 5 years old, you're broadcasting at 60 hertz, 60 gigahertz using exactly the same frequency. If you step outside and you enjoy the fact that your weather forecast told you exactly how the weather was,
30 seconds?
You are literally experiencing significantly higher radiation on significantly higher modulation from the weather satellites that are broadcasting down on you right now. Even C-band, which everybody's concerned about with airports, it literally was at thousands of times more power with 6-foot antennas in everybody's yards with dishes. And yet now we're talking 100 watts of power. To give an example really quickly, there's a Wi-Fi antenna right there using exactly the same encoding as 5G. It right now is negative 42 dB, okay? And the lower the number, the worse it is. My cell phone on AT&T right now is negative 119 dB. That means that it's about 17 times less powerful in this room than the Wi-Fi that you're sitting with.
Okay.
Using the same frequency.
Thank you. That's great information. Do we have committee questions for Mr. Hancock? Representative Thomas is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for this question. Just out of curiosity, how do you account for the apparentness that there are people that have testified with having conditions of various sorts that seem to be living within certain radiuses of this type of technology? Have you personally heard of any issues in your experience?
Yes, and I'll address it simply. I have celiac disease, but celiac disease wasn't actually a thing until about 20 years ago. But did that mean that because we discovered that celiac makes people allergic to the proteins in wheat, does that mean that there was a massive increase in people that had celiac disease? No, we discovered it. We created science to actually monitor it and empirically discover what was going on. Autism is another perfect example. We're constantly told that autism is caused by vaccinations, and yet with 95% assuredness, a professional in autism can diagnose a child with autism, and I know because my wife is one, at 95% accuracy before their first vaccination, okay? The key is that we now think of autism as an epidemic in this country, but what it actually is that until 1990, we didn't actually have a solid definition for autism, nor did we have the science to actually discover it. So we've gone and attributed causation to correlation caused by increased testing. We've even seen this with COVID-19. We massively increased the testing in the state and then breathlessly reported that the number of cases is way up. Did we prove anything? No. What we proved is that if you test more, you'll get more cases. Exactly the same thing is happening here. So these events, and I'm not denying that they happen, and in fact, I would absolutely guarantee that there are people that are actually susceptible to EMF radiation, but it's not just cell phone radiation. It's all radiation, which is everywhere. But we now know what it is, and we have ways to test for it and empirically identify it. So it appears to have become a much more significant problem when it hasn't. We just know about it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Somsich is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming, testifying, and giving us a lot of interesting information. Can you tell me if you are convinced that the 5G technology is somehow essential to what we all benefit from now with all the technologies? Is there no other way around this? The needs that we have, and so do you see that technology as somehow essential to be installed?
So that's a two-part question. First of all, yes, we could all go and wire into plugs in the walls, okay? But the radiation of putting in all those walls, what's there, 50, 60 people in this room? Okay, so if we were to go and wire everybody in this room, every single person would actually have to have an Ethernet cable. And even though the Ethernet cables are insulated, you just put 50 to 60 more in every single room that are broadcasting on exactly the same technology as 5G on those wires that's broadcasting out of the walls. You're literally going to make every single wall filled with cables just as bad. Okay? And realistically, is everybody going to carry around a big 10-foot cable in their pocket and plug in their cell phone to go and use it? No. So the choice is, are you going to actually do something like that? And then in the remote community, in the community, as made an example with emergency services, what's the first thing that burns down? You've got a furnace in a school, which is probably the most likely location for there to be a fire for emergency services to have to respond to. Well, guess where they keep all of their telecommunications equipment with their fiber optics, their switches, and even all the Ethernet that you want to go and walk around and plug your cell phone in, that you're going to have the emergency services? Well, they're in the utility room right beside the boiler room. So as soon as that fire happens, even if you could convince anybody that emergency services could viably go and plug in to be able to get their data on site, it's not going to exist because it's the first thing to burn. Okay?
Follow up.
And I'll be just, there's one more point to this, is that AT&T, so there's a misconception with 5G that 5G requires LTE as well. That's a temporary situation. In fact, T-Mobile is right now actively rolling out 5G that does not require LTE. And AT&T, even on the emergency services network, has said within the next 3 years that the entire emergency service network in the entire country is transitioning to 5G. And while that isn't an issue right now, in 3 years, if New Hampshire was to pass this, New Hampshire would be the only state that would be massively underserved, and the technology would rot because all of AT&T's equipment that it's purchasing would not be allowed to be used in the state. So our technology would rot, it would fall apart, the technology won't be built because there will be no customer for it. And as a result, over time, our emergency services network on LTE will fail. So if we don't allow 5G, then absolutely emergency services will not have wireless communication in this state.
Representative McGee is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Hancock, for coming in today. This makes me pleased that we do have engineers. But the question that I have is, at the beginning of your testimony, you mentioned that 5G was Wi-Fi 6. And
Yes.
you also mentioned that that this technology is 15 to 20% more efficient, which is, I assume, why it can handle more data. So that's the expectation, is that it would be worth...
Just to answer that, so,
Yep.
so 5G is 15 to 20% more efficient per megahertz
Okay.
of signal. So my phone right now has 10 megahertz. If I was to download a video off the internet with 4G and 5G in that same 10 megahertz, it would download 15 to 20% more quickly on exactly the same
Okay.
thing with 5G than 4G. However, 5G is solely being deployed in new frequencies that the FCC has released that are much, much larger. So as an example, T-Mobile bought Sprint, bought 150 megahertz of frequency in 2.5 gigahertz, okay, versus, which is 4 times larger than all of the rest of the bandwidth that they had in the state of New Hampshire. So as a result, they immediately quadrupled the amount of data that they can handle over the airwaves that they own. But there is no 4G in that spectrum. In the new C-band, the new 3.5 or 3.8 gigahertz and millimeter wave, we're talking orders of magnitude. As an example, T-Mobile has 800 megahertz of millimeter wave frequency. If you wanted to cover the Manchester Stadium, you can't do it using regular traditional frequencies because there's simply not enough bandwidth. You have to use ultra-high, ultra-wideband communications, of which there's simply no technology, because New Hampshire would be the only one, that will actually work in those frequencies using old LTE or even 3G or any other technology.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Follow up.
So does that mean all of that you just said, does that mean bigger pipe?
Yes, much,
Yeah.
much bigger pipe.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Callie Pitts, you have a very quick question.
I don't know if it's quick, but I'm confused because when we heard testimony, we heard that 5G piggybacks 4G. And it sounded to me, and this is marketing terms, what you are saying is, and forgive me if I'm wrong and correct me, that if we don't roll out this 4G, we're all stuck without cell service.
5G, but
This
yes.
5G. And that's a very scary, in my mind, prospect, that I won't be able to pick up my phone and call 911. And
Over
I
time,
don't-
that's true.
I don't believe that that is the case. So can you please correct me to say that if we don't use this particular service, who we don't know who manufactures it, that maybe in 5 years we're all going to be stuck without service and that everything in New Hampshire is going to rot? I thought that my impression was that 4G was still going to be operable. Could you correct me?
So 5G was rushed to market as a pitch that should not have been released to the market when it was released, but companies rushed it to market. That's why it required LTE service to be able to uplink back to the towers. However, that's changing. That's called NR, or New Radio. SA, which is standalone 5G, is already being deployed right now by T-Mobile. If you have a 5G phone in New Hampshire on T-Mobile and it says 5G, you're solely broadcasting using 5G technology. AT&T, Verizon's new 5G network, it all is SA, meaning standalone, does not require LTE. We know who the manufacturer of these devices are, but this is, if you go and draw a parallel, we're still to this day, until very, very recently, using 2G for voice and SMS text messaging. Okay, and the reason why we did this is because it was vastly incompatible. Except when LTE came along for the first time, because 3G didn't even have voice, when LTE came along, we actually made it all work like voice over IP, just like the stuff that's used on most landlines is voice over IP off of fiber optics. All of the cell phone companies now, if you have an LTE signal, your voice is actually over that voice over IP. Well, the key is that 5G works with voice over IP exactly the same way as LTE, and they're completely interoperable. So what will happen is, unlike the past where 2G stuck around for decades, when it comes to 5G, 4G is not going to stick around for decades. And the reality of engineering is that the reason why things cost what they do is because of mass purchases. So if New Hampshire is the only state left and everybody else has gone to 5G and New Hampshire can't, there isn't going to be a cost-benefit analysis to produce the minor number, we're talking thousands of units at most, instead of millions of units, to be able to maintain and replace 4G LTE towers with more 4G LTE service, because literally everyone else will have gone to 5G. In fact, the 5G consortium, which includes every single one of the cell carriers in New Hampshire, expects that within the next 7 years that LTE will be decommissioned. So instead of 20 to 30 years for 2G, we're talking 5 to 7 years.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Hancock. This has been very good information. I still have 4 people who would like to testify, so I would like to move along and call next Terry Clark from Keene, New Hampshire. Mr. Clark, I'm going to give you 3 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Terry Clark, and I'm a county commissioner from Cheshire County. I was a member of the Keene City Council in 2019 when staff brought in an ordinance to us that set guidelines for installing small cell antennas in public right-of-way. And the problem the council faced was that it wasn't legal, apparently. The council couldn't really consider health effects in determining the guidelines. But the ordinance did include non-binding preferences for location standards, but they were ignored when a wireless company applied for licenses to install these small cells in clustered neighborhoods and very close to elementary schools, Keene's largest elementary school, in fact. Now, I understand the Federal Communications Commission's small cell order, which restricts what municipalities can require of providers. In my mind, it simply failed the citizens at Keene by not enabling the city council to make rules protecting neighborhoods and schools. And I think this bill would fix that. Peer review studies have convinced me that bombarding humans with high-frequency radio wave bandwidth is harmful. As a background, I served in an air defense artillery unit in the early 1970s. And at the time, there were discussions then about new technologies which, using high-frequency radio waves, could not only disrupt electrical systems and communications equipment, but could also heat human skin levels, immobilizing enemy soldiers. And they were talking about the bandwidth of a millimeter wave, which is between 30 gigahertz and 300 gigahertz, the range of 5G technology uses. If we're going to use this kind of technology, well, let me just say that my fear is that we've gotten away from discussing the health effects of this technology with the emergence of a multi-billion-dollar communications industry, probably trillions of dollars. The military at the time decided not to pursue this because it violated many of the international treaties that we had for weapons systems and things, and it was discovered that such a thing wouldn't be a humane way to kill people. In any case, at the time, I had a particular grade level and expertise in the area, and
30 seconds.
I could talk more intelligently about it than I can right now because I've been out of the industry, but I agree with the State Commission that the FCC based the small cell order on outdated and incomplete findings. I don't think that we've really been talking about the safety and health of this kind of technology. Just because we have technology now that we've been using, we really don't know the effect of what we're using right now, long-term effect on people. Now, this state, which is proud of its home rule heritage, needs legislation that enables municipalities to protect its citizens from sometimes rash decisions that we get into that in the past have all too frequently been made in the interest of progress. So,
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate your testimony. Are there questions for this gentleman? Seeing none,
Thank you.
I will call on the next person who has signed up to testify, and that would be Roseanne Chester of Bedford.
Thank you, committee chair. Thank you, committee members.
3 minutes, please.
Absolutely. So I'm coming here specifically as a citizen, but I do want to let you folks know that I have experience with this kind of situation when I worked for a private company that handled almost all of the weaponry for our military. The 5G clearly is the same type of resources that they had developed. So is 5G a weapon? I don't know. Does it have the potential to be a weapon? Absolutely. Similar to nuclear power. Nuclear power is supposedly extremely safe, but anytime we hear the word nuclear, we automatically think of the nuclear bomb. So I just want to bring that to your attention. More importantly, as a someone who has traumatic brain injury, I used to be very much not a conspiracy theorist about the tinfoil hats and all that kind of stuff. And I still don't know for sure if my traumatic brain injury and my sensitivity has increased because of that traumatic brain injury and if it interacts with radio waves. What I do know that when I worked with children with traumatic brain injury, infant all the way up, or acquired brain injury, that they could be asleep in the car and we could go by a cell tower that was very close and they would cry out. Do I know why? No. But has it happened on a number of occasions? Absolutely. So I just want you folks to really consider that when you're thinking about something like this. I've heard time and time and time again, we can't be left behind. The people of New Hampshire want it. If they knew the potential consequences, would they really want it? Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Chester? Seeing none, I will thank you for your testimony. And I will now call on the next person. The next two folks on our list are both from out of state, and the first is Deborah Chandler of South Hadley, Massachusetts. Haven't we seen you before? You don't
You
Oh,
look like
have,
Deborah
and I
Chandler.
apologize. Deborah came to my house last night, and I'll explain what happened. My name is Deborah Chandler. I suffer from microwave radiation syndrome. After I was here to testify on January 18th, but didn't get to speak, it took me 5 days to recover from 3 hours of exposure in this room from everyone's laptops, tablets, smartphones, wearables, and that Wi-Fi access point. I could not take that risk again, so I have asked CC Doucette to read this statement on my behalf. Please create an accommodation under the Americans with Disabilities Act so those injured by wireless radiation can testify remotely from the safety of our own radiation-free homes. Subsequent to Courtney Gilardi and her daughter Amelia testifying before you 2 weeks ago about the cell tower that made their neighborhood so sick, the Board of Health in Pittsfield, Massachusetts has issued a groundbreaking cease and desist order against Verizon Wireless cell tower. It is the Board of Health's lawful duty to protect the public health, and the Telecom Act preemption apparently applies only to the permitting process, not to what happens after the cell towers are turned on. This first poster that Deb, she was a graphic artist. She had to leave her profession when she became ill. This first poster illustrates common symptoms suffered when a cell tower goes up, and you will see brain damage, ears, skin, mood, eye, heart, and others. The New Hampshire 5G Commission report includes the Bioinitiative report, a compendium that I showed you a little bit ago, of the peer-reviewed scientific literature. There are color charts available at bioinitiative.org to help the public understand the science. We see in the key, down at the bottom, the categories of disrupted immune function, fertility effects, oxidative damage, DNA repair failure, brain tumors, cancers, cardiac damage, and issues with sleep, neuron firing rate, memory, learning, and behavior. You'll also see these studies span decades. This one she pointed out was nearly 50 years ago. The industry has known about this since the 1990s, despite the denials and disinformation they have given to you. The Pittsfield public health tragedy and so many others like it could have been prevented had there been a federal law in place forbidding cell towers and antennas at close range. There isn't, though. So it's up to our states to ensure responsible technology deployment. New Hampshire can still have cell coverage if you require industry to site antennas away from the public. The phone signals can travel for miles.
30 seconds.
Some may be tempted to negotiate the 1,640-foot distance in House Bill 1644, but that is already half of where the science still shows increases in cancers, neurological orders, and more. Dr. Kent Chamberlain, who's with us today and served on that commission, provided you each with a video to understand these setbacks. At the 10-minute mark, you'll see increased death rates start to drop off at 500 meters or 1,640 feet, but there are still elevated risks up to nearly 1,000 meters or 3,000 feet.
Okay, thank you. That's all we have time for. I do have one quick question for you. Do you
Yes.
know of any epidemiological studies about this question?
Yes, in Dr. Chamberlain's presentation, he is referencing the epidemiological studies.
Great, thank you. I'll look that up.
Okay.
Okay, any questions for Ms. Chandler's surrogate, Representative Cretion?
Thank you, Chair, for recognizing me. Thank you for taking my question. So I took a look through the Bioinitiative report, and I have to confess I found it a little bit hard to follow some of the specific mechanisms that they were proposing was causing these damages. Could you talk a little bit more about
Mechanism of harm?
exactly, yeah, what they're...
So for a long time, the industry could spin it that, well, it must be fine because we don't have any mechanisms of harm identified. That is no longer true. One of the mechanisms of harms occurs at the voltage-gated calcium channels. So when we have this spike of radiation hitting our biological cells at millions of times in the gigahertz range or billions of times or I'm sorry, in the megahertz range, billions of times in the gigahertz range, it's doing this to our cells. That disrupts the voltage-gated calcium channels. It causes them to have a chemical reaction outside the cell wall that produces a really nasty free radical called peroxynitrite. Peroxynitrite then will go into your body and have a host of downstream effects. For you, it might be breast cancer. For you, it might be testicular cancer. For you, it might be heart or brain. So wherever your body's weakest proclivity is, that's where we see harm developing. Another mechanism of harm is called the Rouleaux Effect. So when I was a kid, I used to love those candies called Rouleaux that stack up. That's what happens when you magnetize our red blood cells. They should be individually free-floating and oxygenating all of our biological cells. When you have this magnetic field, it's causing our red blood cells to form the Rouleaux effect, or this clumping. And then that clump can't get to where it needs to go to bring oxygen to all of our systems. At the EMF Medical Conference that was held last January, those courses are still available today. The doctors talked a lot about that Rouleaux effect, and they also talked a lot about when you put up a cell tower outside somebody's house or a smart meter on their home, that's where they see an increased patient load of people suffering from microwave sickness. So those are only two of the effects. There are many more that we could discuss. Infertility is a really big one too.
All right, we have one more person who would like to testify. So I would like to call now on Frank Clegg from Maple Shore Village or Maple Grove Village in Ontario, Canada, Oakville, Ontario, Canada.
Thank you very much, Chairman Vos. Mr. Clegg could not be here, but he asked me to read his statement. Esteemed committee members.
Can you do so in 3 minutes?
I will.
Thank you.
Esteemed committee members, my name is Frank Clegg, and I'm the retired president of Microsoft Canada and founder of Canadians for Safe Technology. I flew in to testify with you in 2019 on Representative Abrami's original House Bill 522, and I'm one of the experts brought in for the 5G Commission investigation. I've met with scientific experts from around the world and concluded wireless technology is not safe. I'm especially concerned with 5G and the impact of wireless technologies on children. Your groundbreaking New Hampshire Commission report has become a guidepost not only in the US, but here in Canada and Europe as well. The 1,640-foot setback will protect New Hampshire citizens from any new wireless infrastructure in the short term. As your Commission report indicates, though, the ultimate goal is to install superior fiber to and through the premises. Please know, wireless technology is no longer the preferred technology for communications. There are an insignificant number of applications that truly require a wireless connection. The majority of communications applications can benefit from the advantages of a wired connection. Wired connectivity eliminates harmful radio frequency or RF radiation. Wired broadband is at least 100 times faster, more reliable and resilient, and is far more protective of privacy than wireless connectivity. According to the IEEE, wireless technologies, quote, consume at least 10 times more power than wired technologies. A 5G base station is expected to consume roughly 3 times as much power as a 4G base station. Greenpeace reports if the cloud were a country, it would be the fifth largest consumer of energy in the world. Former FCC chair Tom Wheeler is now backing fiber to the premises. AT&T is already moving there. In July, California passed legislation for fiber to the premises. In Switzerland, the Romonde Energy Company and the Swiss Fornet Telecom Company have already formed a new alliance for fiber to the home, as they call it. Fiber to the premises solves the broadband equity issues, finally closing the digital divide. The cost is not prohibitive. Wherever we run electricity lines, we can insert fiber optics. Properly sited cell towers carry signal for miles and do not need to be located near the populace. The industry, however, has a history of installing where it is convenient and less costly for them, right on top of neighborhoods where the electrical connections already exist. Once we install fiber to and through the premises and educate the public to minimize toxic wireless connections,
30 seconds.
The capacity demands for wireless diminish and there is ample capacity for cell phone calls on the go. Investing in fiber to the premises for primary connectivity will bring an economic boon to New Hampshire. The industry started as the Cellular Telecommunications Industry Association. Then they rebranded as CTIA, the Wireless Association. They're already preparing their next revenue stream by buying into the entertainment industry for streaming services. The industry will grumble, but they will pivot to provide superior connectivity with fiber to and through the premises if they are
thank
incented
you.
to do so.
Thank you very much. Since that's written testimony, if you could make sure Mr. Clegg submits it to the committee via email, we would appreciate that. So, it's been brought to my attention that there is one other person who wants to testify on this bill, someone who has driven all the way up here from Pennsylvania. And so, against my better judgment, I'm going to allow this person to testify for 3 minutes. So Mr. Eric Swanson, I believe that's how the name is pronounced, you're recognized to testify for 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for allowing me the 3 minutes. My name is Eric Swanson. I've been asked to talk to you about health effects of this technology by CTIA. I'm a professor of physics at the University of Pittsburgh. I'm a member of the Union of Concerned Scientists, and I'm a fellow of the American Physical Society. The technology we're talking about is non-ionizing radio waves. Non-ionizing means that it is below what's called the ionization threshold, where electromagnetic radiation has enough energy to disrupt chemical processes. Because this technology, 5G in particular, is 30,000 times below that energy, it has no verified effects on the human body except for heating. Because of this heating, the FCC regulates this technology. The regulations are extremely strict. I won't give you the numbers. I would like to point out that some of the things you've heard are completely wrong, so please ask me questions afterwards, if you like. I won't give you numbers, but let me give you comparisons. My brain is a radio transmitter. I can explain why if you're interested. It violates FCC regulations by about a factor of 10. The sun violates FCC regulations by about a factor of 16. My hot water bottle that I put on my knee this morning because it was warm violates FCC regulations by about a factor of 50. As you might gather from what I'm saying, these regulations are extremely strict and protect us very well. I'll stop there because I know you're short of time, but I'm very happy to answer questions.
Mr. Swanson would love to hear your questions. Representative Lewicki is recognized for the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Swanson, for taking my question. One of the things that I've been trying to get to is what is the spectrum, power and frequency? And I keep hearing different answers from different people, and so when we're talking about cell phones, whether it's 5G or otherwise, we've got 800, 1600 megahertz, and so on and so forth. What amount of power do we get at that? How does that compare with the ambient radiation from radio stations?
Right. So good question. Thank you. You mentioned power and frequency. So frequencies are higher. They can go up to 30 gigahertz. They are typically right now at 1 gigahertz. That's a factor of 30 higher. So the higher one, remember, is 30,000 times below the limit. The power, you don't get a definitive answer to that because there isn't one. It depends on the situation. The companies are very proprietary about all this. They typically, for 5G though, are very low compared to the 4G towers that are out there. They will run at something like 20 to 40 watts. The towers would be, say, 400 watts. For comparison, your laptop is about 100 watts.
Further questions for Mr. Swanson? Representative Bernardi is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Professor. So the bill that we have in front of us limits distance for these towers. Do you see that as inhibiting the proliferation of 5G technology?
Yes, it does. It's also nonsensical. If you stand at the base of one of these high-power 4G towers, you'll be at 1/1000th of the FCC limit, which is very strict. If you limit the density of the 5G, then you may as well not have 5G. It's designed to be low power and dense. That's the whole idea. You get less, you know, there's less immediate exposure when you make it low power, but you have more of them.
Follow up?
So what would be your recommendation then that the industry should seek for its density? How far apart should these towers be?
Yeah,
Or
if we're talking about
sites?
if we're talking about 5G, it's the sites, and
Yeah.
they typically will be, it depends, again, on details, but typically a block apart. Again, they're very low power to all of our benefit, higher, more reliable communication and less exposure.
Thank you.
Representative Sopcich is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Swanson, for coming to testify. It seems to me that the main incentive for the 5G deployment has to do with business.
Please ask a question. Don't make a statement.
I don't understand that the reason behind it would be a health effect. I think, wouldn't you agree that the main motivation for this 5G rollout is not health benefits, but basically business driven?
I'm sure that the main motivation is to provide customers with the services they desire. It's not so much about health, yes.
Representative Callie Pitts has a question.
Quickly, you mentioned the standing at the base of a cell tower, which I have never done. But what would happen, or what is the cumulative effect of me constantly walking by or living near a cell tower and having it outside my door? And I don't understand that correlation.
That's a fair question. There actually is no cumulative effect. I can explain this best with an analogy. Say that I want to throw a rock across a river. The river's too wide. I can't get the rock across. Now, I'm stubborn, so I keep trying to throw the rock across the river. Am I going to get the rock across? No. The same thing happens with this. There is not enough energy in these 5G waves to disrupt anything, and it doesn't matter how long you stand there, it's still not going to disrupt anything, for basically exactly the same river as I said with the rock throwing. The same reason I said with the rock throwing.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions for Representative McGee is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so this, my question is, we just heard some testimony, again, taking notes here. We just heard some testimony about bioeffects, basically. I'm trying to find the notes. Voltage gated calcium channels being disrupted, and my notes are all over the place, so I'm sorry. and the Rouleaux effect. So I don't know if you know anything about those things, but I just wonder if you have any impressions on that.
I'm happy to give you a sort of an overview of this stuff. I hear about this all the time. It's all wrong, all of it. And I want to explain why this even exists. The medical industry standard for conducting a study is to work at a 5% false positive level. It's called alpha. All medical studies desire to have a 5% false positive level, meaning that if you run 100 studies, 5 of them are going to find something. That's the definition of the false positive level. Yeah. 25,000 studies have been done, estimated by the World Health Organization. 5% of that is about 1,000. About 1,000 studies are going to find something. Now, what do they find? It's random, remember? It's the false positive rate. So they find random stuff. And it's all over the map. And the reason it's all over the map, and the reason you get such a long laundry list of disastrous things, is because it's random. When people focus on those 1,000 studies, the 5%, they are ignoring the 95% of studies that don't find any effect whatsoever. It's, of course, it's natural instinct, of course, to just, oh, that agrees with my viewpoint, I'm going to pay attention to that, and ignore the 95% that disagree with you. That's what underpins all of this stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, this has been a very informative hour and 7 minutes. Unfortunately, it cannot continue because we are committed by schedule to open exec sessions on 5 early bills. So we're going to close the public hearing on House Bill 1644. And I'm going to ask all spectators and members of the minority party Oh, yes. Representative Pimentel, would you give us the blue sheet numbers, please? While Representative Pimentel is looking, I'm going to ask all members of the public and members of the minority party to exit the room for 2 minutes while we have a quick caucus of the majority party.
Mr. Chairman, there are 6 names on the blue sheet. 4 of them are pro and 2 of them are con. And I also have a copy of the House remote testimony, which I don't know you have, but it shows 155 pro, 4 pro, 155 con, and 1 neutral.
Thank you. Okay. We will resume in 2 minutes.
Test, okay, at the mic.
Testing.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats quietly. I would like to resume our exec session. And I want to begin by apologizing to everyone for the late start of this executive session. It was supposed to start at 2 o'clock, and I did my best to make that happen, but was unsuccessful. So I apologize for that, and apologize for any inconvenience that this late start may have caused anyone. I personally feel very strongly that it's disrespectful for committee meetings of this sort not to start on time, because it wastes people's valuable time, and everyone here has time that is valuable to them and the causes that they espouse. So my apologies for the late start. With that, I will open an exec session on House Bill 1419-FN relative to establishing a New Hampshire Civilian Climate Corps Advisory Commission. And the chair recognizes Representative Cambrils for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to make a motion to recommend that we ITL House Bill 1419.
Representative Cambrils has moved that we judge HB 1419 to be ITL. Chair recognizes Representative Ploget.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would like to second that motion on House Bill 1419 to ITL.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded that we ITL House Bill 1419. Is there any discussion? Representative Oxenham is recognized.
I'd like to hear an explanation of why you think this bill should be ITL'd.
Representative Cambril, do you want to respond?
Yes, I thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question. Yes, basically, even there were a lot of good things that were mentioned that the Climate Corps, Civilian Climate Corps group could do, but after researching, I found that almost every single thing that they recommended that would be duties of this commission are already being done by existing groups such as the Department of Environmental Services, Department of Energy, Fish and Game. So I viewed this to be a redundant commission, and I did not think it would be a wise use of the taxpayers' money. So for that reason, I am recommending to ITL. Thank you.
Further discussion on the motion to ITL HB 1419. Representative Bernardi is recognized.
Yes, in addition to what Representative Cambrils indicated, many of the tasks were also activities that are currently conducted by private businesses, and we should not be setting up commissions that interfere with private business activities.
Further discussion, Representative Somcich is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I would say that I'd like to see us support this bill. We hear over and over again from state agencies how they are overstretched. They can't do all their job. They need more people. To say that these functions are being done by state agencies right now, I would be shocked if that was actually the case, because it's certainly within their domain to do it, but I doubt very much that much is being done in this direction. But the main thrust of this particular bill was to energize and activate and get people involved, especially young people who feel strongly they want to contribute, they want to volunteer to their state and do something that they feel strongly about. And this bill is not a costly bill. It's a very simple bill. It's all about volunteerism and getting young people and people interested in climate issues and environment involved. And to say that we don't, and this is not even instituting that program, it's just about a committee who's going to study this. So I don't see why we shouldn't be supporting it.
Representative Callie Pitts is recognized.
I too would hope that we could support it, because we have, and in testimony that I just heard, piecemeal efforts being done in various state agencies and various businesses. And I would think that it is to have a comprehensive commission to put all this together and perhaps eliminate some of that redundancy would be well served. Way back, we had CCC, Conservation Corps, and they did marvelous work, but they mimicked the work of other groups. So having something for young people and maybe consolidating that effort at this time would not be a bad idea. We are all stewards of the planet. Every one of us, whether we believe in climate change or whether we don't, we are to be stewards. We don't own it. We're to take care of it. And that's what most of us believe. And I think that raising young people or teaching young people, that would be a wonderful thing, and consolidating those efforts so that more people would be aware of them would be well worth it. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Notter is recognized for a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In my community, we have volunteers that go out and pick up trash and take care of the environment, and I support that without using taxpayer dollars.
Further comment on the motion to ITL House Bill 1419. Representative Mann is recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Young people have to live in the future, which is distinctly different from my prospects and most of us, in fact. And I think Civilian Conservation Corps would be a way for them to participate in and actively and do something for their own future, which they probably would be dying to do if we gave them half a chance. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Pimentel is recognized for a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Some of the things mentioned was that a lot of other agencies are doing stuff about this. Well, I contend that this advisory commission is a place where we can bring together the DES and the Department of Energy and the Department of Education and a lot of nonprofits that are in the state, and work out how this Civilian Climate Corps could work. Not a penny would be spent until after they come up with a program, and at that point it would go to the legislature as a bill to actually establish this corps. So I think that basically putting the nix to this early is not a good idea, and I'm going to be supporting this bill.
Representative Thomas is recognized for a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I do believe this is a good endeavor, but like other good endeavors, I don't see a need for why the state would have to get involved and establish a commission. There are a lot of organizations out there that are done by volunteers, organized organizations formed as nonprofits. They all do good deeds. I don't see why a private organization of any sort could not be established without this bill to accomplish the same needs. I just don't see why the state should be getting involved with this. I mean, even you can substitute this for saying we should have a commission on how we can get involved with sports in the state. Yet we have numerous nonprofit volunteer state associations that are being run without the state's help. So I don't think this bill is necessary. I think the idea is fair for people that want to get involved with us, and they should form something. But I don't think this bill is the right way to go. I'll be voting against it.
Thank you. Representative Lewicki is recognized for a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Thomas stole my thunder. That was exactly what I was saying. If it's a good idea, then why can't it be voluntary?
Okay, additional comments. Representative Cretion has a comment.
Thank you. So my understanding of the bill is that, you know, it's meant to serve as a place for government to bring together, in addition to, there's a lot of volunteer organizations and nonprofit organizations that are going to be part of this, but part of it is also the idea that there will be, you know, some government federal money coming in for these sorts of things. So just speaking as a younger person in the legislature, I guess, you know, when I look around at things that we've done in this country historically, things that were built by the WPA and the CCC and still last today, it's really powerful, that idea that we can build things that last for a really long time when we work together. And going back to what Representative Mann said earlier, you know, we think about young people today feel so alienated from their community. Maybe this is a great way that we can bring together young people from all over to work together, build something together, and hopefully have a more civil discourse along all kinds of topics. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Grecian. Since you mentioned it, I will also mention that the Civilian Conservation Corps back in the 1930s was created by the government in a time when there was 25% or more unemployment in our country. Today, we have the opposite problem. We have more jobs than we have people to fill them. Further comments on this? Representative Mann has another comment.
Yes, in contrast to the idea, why can't people just do it on their own? I think what the Civilian Corps could do is provide organization and resources. You're doing work in terms of energy efficiency and so on, and improving our prospects in terms of climate change. It will take resources far beyond what I think individuals can find in their pockets. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Mann. Representative Somsich is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm old enough to remember when this country still had a draft. And when the draft was abolished, and when people no longer were forced to provide service to the government, military-wise, a lot of things dropped off the edge. People felt, oh, I don't have to do anything for my country anymore, you know, no more draft. But in fact, there was still the Peace Corps. And if you remember what the Peace Corps had as an impact, first of all, it was mainly young people that joined. And secondly, it projected a vision of America and a portrait of America to the rest of the world. That positive impression lasted many, many decades after it started to dwindle and now has become more something that seniors do instead of young people do. I personally always felt that there needs to be some kind of mandatory national service in this country for everybody, so that everybody should do something in service of their country, whether it's Peace Corps or military or something similar. I think citizens have to have some obligations, and right now they don't. They take it for granted that somebody else will do this for them. This is an opportunity to do something that might energize young people and energize other people to say, I'd like to do something when it comes to the climate or energy efficiency or the environment. And government needs to be there to help organize something like this. It might turn out to be very inexpensive. After all, Peace Corps workers were pretty cheap too back then. So I think for those reasons, we really should consider encouraging these things and not discouraging them. Thank you.
Representative Notter is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an example of the community coming together without the government sticking their nose in it. In the town of Merrimack, a few years back, the Rotary Club organized a rebuilding Twin Bridge Park. And it was just a vast array of people, old people, grandparents, parents, and young people as well, all working together. They renovated Kids Cove, that's what we call Twin Bridge Park, and it's really nice. And the government had nothing to do with it, and it worked well.
Thank you. Representative Kelly Pitts.
I have two observations, and I'll go to the last one first. Representative Notter, what if I wanted to help rebuild a park in your community? I would not have known anything about it. So that consolidation and a place to go. The other piece of information that I would like to correct, and I'm looking at Representative Thomas, and I hate to do that, but the government has stuck its nose in sports. And it's only certain sports, and I do believe we have a commissioner of a certain sport in this state, which is boxing. Thank you.
Representative Thomas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to go back to the previous comments made by Representative Somsich. I agree with you. Young people should take responsibility. I do remember the time when it was a draft. Based on your comments, maybe the federal government should reinstate the draft to have people to do work for their country. But I think it would be best served that if this was that idea that you're speaking of, perhaps it should be the federal government that establishes something and not just a patchwork of state by state. So I would think that New Hampshire should perhaps, if this is that important, should wait and see if the federal government would like to establish a national program in which the state could perhaps join in as a state association on something like that. So that's my comments on that. And by the way, yes, Representative Kelly Pitts, boxing does have a commissioner, but soccer does not. I don't know why, but we do quite well here in the state, have our own private association on that one. So thank you.
Thank you. Representative Murner is recognized for a comment.
Thank you, Chairman. In the 70s, the late 70s, we had a similar program in this country because we had very high unemployment. And being in the construction trades, we created the Cedar Program. Again, it was based on employment. You know, the government did fund it, and an amazing amount of stuff got done back then. Because back then we were at 11% unemployment for a couple of years. Right now, we have no unemployment, to Chairman Vose's point, so I can't see how this program would work. I think we'd be throwing into something that's just not sustainable to do at this time. Thank you.
Representative Oxenham has another comment.
Yes. First, I'd like to point out that the federal funds under the American Rescue Plan are cited in the fiscal note. Those would not be available to voluntary organizations or to Rotary organizations. Secondly, we have a demographic crisis in this state. We're losing our young people. We're losing them to better opportunities elsewhere and because of despair. What I hear and what I received in letters about this were from people who can't sleep at night, have nightmares about climate crisis, and taking action is the best antidote to despair and apathy. And I think the government has a role here. We have the funding to do it. That we're in an unusual situation with funding. And this could be something, the commission doesn't have to last forever, but it's 4 meetings a year, for a couple of years. I think it's a worthwhile endeavor and could have very positive ramifications for bringing young people to the state, for retaining people who we are losing because people don't see opportunities here.
Thank you. We might retain more of our young people if we built more affordable housing here in New Hampshire. I have a bill for that. So do I. I was supposed to testify on it this morning, but municipal and county government was so far behind I never got to it. So now I have to come back Wednesday. I might also point out that the Civilian Climate Corps that's mentioned in this bill was originally envisioned as being part of the Build Back Better plan, which has now apparently died in Congress. So there may not be a federal or nationwide Civilian Climate Corps in the near future. Therefore, I would think it would be premature to start a commission to advise such a climate corps if it doesn't exist. All right, seeing no further comments on this issue, I think I would like to ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion to ITL, House Bill 1419. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. Representative Thomas.
Recommendation to ITL, yes.
Representative Johnson,
Yes.
Representative Nodder,
Yes.
Representative Murner.
Yes.
The clerk votes yes. Representative Berejny,
Yes.
Representative Bernardi,
Yes.
Representative Cambrils,
Yes.
Representative Ploget,
Yes.
Representative White,
Yes.
Representative Lewicki,
Yes.
Representative Somsich,
No.
Representative Callie Pitts, Representative Mann,
No.
Representative Oxenham. No. Representative Vincent is not here. Representative McGee. No. Representative McWilliams.
No.
Representative Creechin.
No.
Representative Pimentel. No. Representative Paschal.
No.
And the chair.
Yes.
Thirteen yes. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, correct. 12, yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 10 opposed.
12 to 9.
1. Yeah, it is. You're correct, both cases.
Okay, by a vote of 12 to 9, the motion to ITL HB 1419 passes. So I will close the public hearing on, the executive session rather, on HB 1419. And I will open an executive session on HB 1506 and recognize Representative Lewicki for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I recommend ITL on HB 1506.
And the chair recognizes Representative Murner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would second the motion to ITL.
It's been moved and seconded that we
Mr. Chairman?
ITL HB 1506. Is there discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Representative-
Were we
Majority
assigning
minority report?
minority reports and majority reports for the last bill?
Good question and good point. Thank you. Yes, we will assign a minority report
Minority
writer.
report for Representative Kelly Pitts?
Representative Callie Pitts will write the minority report?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so now we have a motion on the floor to ITL HB 1506. Is there discussion on the motion? Representative McWilliams.
Thank you, Chair Bose. As you know, this was a bill that I prime-sponsored to focus on creating a fund that could be revolving to focus on new and nascent energy projects in the state of New Hampshire. I'd love to have some more discussion on it. I did present an amendment. I don't know if everyone's had an opportunity to look at it, but they've been handed out, and if you don't have one, let me know. I have a stack over here of extra 1506 amendments. Basically, it takes the base bill and just amends a couple of the sections that we discussed during testimony that could be a problem to iron out some of the issues, including addressing vulnerable and low-income communities, putting in some enabling language so the Department of Energy would actually have the ability to farm out through the request for proposals process management for banks to manage the funds rather than the Department of Energy managing funds. And also making sure that this can actually sustain with financing fees over the long term. But for the short term, the intention was that these funds would be used to pay for staff at the Department of Energy, at least until things get going. So more enabling language there. But as we discussed at the public hearing, really the intent here is for this bill to be a bucket, to create a bucket of funds so that we can look to the future of energy in the state of New Hampshire. And so I'm disappointed to see an ITL recommendation right out the gate, and I'd like to understand a little bit more about other concerns with this concept. I'm happy to have a discussion about that.
Okay, would anyone like to Representative Lewicki has a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. HB 1506 would duplicate many programs that are already in existence, both public and private. These existing programs include both government and commercial. Thereby, it would make the government of New Hampshire the investor of last resort after everybody else has refused these programs. It would impose mandates and costs on the Department of Energy, which are not addressed, and which the Department of Energy apparently does not wish to undertake. And the final one, which may have been taken out in the amendment, which I haven't seen, would be the explicit racial discrimination on page 3, lines 10 through 12.
That was removed. Would you like a copy of the amendment?
Sure.
Okay, further discussion on House Bill 1506 and the motion to ITL. Representative Somstich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill is something that, as the fiscal note mentions, is often referred to in other states as setting up a green bank. And it's been done in many places, and the idea is we can have a revolving fund to help fund various projects that have to do with energy efficiency, energy projects, and so forth. And it would be self-sustaining, essentially. When it's a revolving fund, you basically give out the loan and you get the money back. And it would be funded by various sources, federal, state, and organizations all over the country who are currently actually putting money into such funds to encourage more projects of this nature, including many corporations that are doing it because they want to make a statement about their particular company. So I think this is a worthwhile effort, and I don't think there's much of an effort going on right now in our state to do this, but we have to start somewhere, and we have to start by having a fiscally responsible way of funding projects like this. It's always surprising how many people in other states, once you have a fund like this, how many organizations, companies, and others step forward to say, I'd like to put some money into that. I think that's a good investment for my future and my children's future. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on House Bill 1506. Representative McGee is recognized for a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think I'd like to just reiterate, I'm always happy when I see folks come up with, creative ideas that have worked in other places for us to consider. And I actually really like this bill because I think the concept of the bucket is to say that if we don't have a bucket, no one's going to be putting anything in the bucket. But if we enable a place for green funds to be collected, then it could end up being a force multiplier in a very positive way for finding supports for things that we don't want to fund through other means. So if we don't want to fund things through ratepayers, and we have exceptions to those types of programs, and then we look at this, which is offering us an alternative, which is saying, we're going to allow people who have funds and have interest in this to be able to donate their money here and let us put it to work for them. I think it's a really worthwhile idea, and I want to thank you for bringing it. I have heard of green banks before, but I know New Hampshire hasn't done anything like this before, so I just commend you for bringing it, and I hope that folks will consider it more strongly than to just say we've decided it's going to be inexpedient to legislate, because this is the kind of idea that we should probably be coming together across party lines to support. This doesn't cost anybody anything, and it gets us where we would like to be, which is having money available for people to do things that will benefit everybody.
Thank you. Representative Bernardi is recognized for a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this idea to me is perfect as a private nonprofit enterprise, not as a government-run organization. And I commend you to things like Tunnel for Towers or Habitat for Humanity. These are organizations that have a slightly different tilt than what you're looking at, but the concept is there, and it demonstrates that private nonprofits can clearly do the kind of thing that you're looking to accomplish.
Further discussion. Representative McWilliams, did you have another comment you wanted to make?
I just wanted to reiterate that there is no state funds at all in this bill. This is completely volunteer donations and, if available, federal funds. This is not a state funded. This is not about our taxpayers or even ratepayer dollars.
Thank you. Now that you mention that, I would point out that the fiscal note with this bill suggested that a source of funding for this green bank could be American Rescue Plan funds, but I would remind everyone that those are one-time funds, and even if there were some allocated to this green bank, it would need to get other money from somewhere else in the future in order to sustain itself. Representative Oxenham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the one-time funds are helpful to set up the fund. So it's not looking for ongoing funds, although who knows what the feds may come up with in the future. If you look at the top of page 4, it says outright that this is looking to partner with private capital providers and capital markets to attract co-investment from private banks, community development financial institutions, investors, and others in order to drive new investment into under-penetrated markets, to increase the efficiency of private capital markets with respect to investing in greenhouse gas reduction projects, and to increase total investment from the fund. And then it specifies underneath of that. This is not something a private organization like Habitat for Humanity is capable of doing. You know, this is something that needs to be audited. It needs to be financially secure. It needs to be vetted by the banks and also by the federal funders. So yes, I think the idea here is a good one, and it is certainly not duplicative of anything that is currently going on in New Hampshire, and it would bring funding to under-resourced areas that currently do not receive funding because there's not the security for the capital. Private investment, to reference Representative Bernardi's point, it's perfectly possible for private investors to do this at this moment, but they don't have the security to do it. This would be a secure mechanism, and I think we should support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Callie Pitts, you had a comment to make, did you not?
I did. And I guess I felt that this type of funding for a long time I thought would be excellent for this revolving fund for low-income housing or medium-income housing, which you mentioned. I also believe that this bill probably is not ready for prime time. And I hate to say that, but I don't think it is. And I think it deserves more attention and more study, either in this committee or in another committee. And I know, and because I say things like a loose cannon, it's election year, and it's hard to get people to want to study things. But I think the time has come. ARPA money is available. We need seed money, is what we used to call it in the old days. We need seed money. It's like priming the well. You got to put water in it sometimes to get it out. So I think that this is not quite ready to become an RSA, but I think it's not quite ready to die. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? I'd remind all members that there were similar programs that have been created in the past. The first one that comes to mind is the PACE program that attempted to do very similar things as this bill. And that program has been wrought with fraud, with manipulation, with financial problems, and has not delivered on its promises. And as a result of that, I would be reluctant to go forward with a program such as this one without a more robust description of how it would operate, how it would be overseen, and how it would be funded. Representative Callie Pitts, did you have a response to that?
The response I had was simply that this to me is one of the reasons that it needs a program like this. One, needs more study, but needs more state controls than what we can have, than what we can put on it, that we can audit, that we can make sure the money goes where it's supposed to. And if it was a totally private thing, we wouldn't have that control. So I think that's just proves to me, the proof is in the pudding, that we would need to have it as a state-controlled program.
Representative Thompson, you have another comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick one. It seems to me, under the circumstances right now where we're trying to define what exactly the Department of Energy is supposed to do or not do, this is the kind of program it should be doing in all kinds of areas. So it seems to me that it's worth keeping in mind that just because we don't have it now doesn't mean we won't have anything like this in the future.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Seeing no other further comments on this bill, I'd like the clerk to call the roll on the motion of ITL on House Bill 1506. Mr. Clerk.
Representative Thomas. Representative Johnson.
Yes.
Representative Notter.
Yes.
Representative Murner.
Yes.
Representative Plett. Yes, says yes. Representative Berejny.
Yes.
Representative Bernardi.
Yes.
Representative Cambrils.
Yes.
Representative Ploget.
Yes.
Representative White.
Yes.
Representative Lewicki.
Yes.
Representative Samsic.
No.
Representative Callie Pitts. Representative Mann. Representative Oxenham.
No.
Representative Vincent not being here. Representative McGee. Representative McWilliams.
Emphatic no.
Representative Creechin.
Also emphatic no.
Representative Pimentel. No. Representative Paschal. No. I have 12-9-1.
You didn't ask the
Chairman Vos.
Yes.
Yeah, you want to take the job over, you can.
Committee will be in order, please. Mr. Clerk, please announce the result of the vote.
I just did, 12-9-1, after I asked for your vote.
Okay. By a vote of 12 yeas and 9 nays, the motion to ITL House Bill 1506 is adopted. Will there be a minority report?
Yes, I believe Representative McWilliams, you'll write the minority. Thank you.
Representative McWilliams will write the minority report.
And incidentally, Mr. Chairman, when will you need these reports?
I was just about to mention that. We need those reports by close of business tomorrow. I have to submit them on Wednesday morning. Okay, with that, we'll close the public hearing on HB 1506. And we will open a public, why do I keep saying public hearings? We will open an exec session on HB 1601 relative to funding the New Hampshire Saves program. And the chair recognizes Representative White for a motion.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to move that we ITL this.
Representative White has moved ITL on HB 1601. Representative Bernardi is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded that we ITL HB 1601. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment. Can I give that out to everyone?
There is a motion on the floor. You can pass it out for information, but there
Yeah.
is a motion on the floor.
Understand.
Is there any discussion of the motion on the floor? Okay, seeing no indication that there's any discussion to be had,
Well, yes. there is.
Representative Samsic is recognized for a comment.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As I mentioned in my testimony on this bill, this is an attempt to try to ensure that the revenues from the Reggie allowances that the state gets be at least at a certain floor level and never go down. We had a testimony by PUC Chairwoman Diane Martin telling us recently that the Reggie allowance prices are expected to rise, and as they rise, it would be nice if we could benefit from that, both in the portion that is invested in energy efficiency, which was the goal of Reggie, as well as money that goes back to as rebates to the customers. So when the Reggie allowances go up, everybody would benefit. However, if we don't change the formula that we have right now, which is just $1 of the allowance, no matter what the price of the allowance, then what will happen is, as the allowances rise, the same amount of money would go back to energy efficiency. It would not benefit from increasing allowance prices. And that was the intention, setting a floor and saying if that floor is higher, then it would be 15% of the allowances instead of just the $1. If it's not, it stays at least at a floor level. So this provides some consistent funding, and otherwise we will be losing out to more investments that we could make in energy efficiency. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments on House Bill 1601 and the motion for ITL? Seeing none, I'd ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion of ITL on House Bill 1601.
Representative Thomas.
Yes.
Hold on. Yes, I know. Representative Johnson.
Yes.
Why isn't that capitalized? Hold on. There. Representative Nodder.
Yes.
Representative Murner.
Yes.
Representative Plett says yes. Representative Berejny.
Yes.
Representative Bernardi.
Yes.
Representative Cambrils.
Yes.
Representative Ploget.
Yes.
Representative White.
Yes.
Representative Lewicki.
Yes.
Representative Somsich.
No.
Representative Callie Pitts. Representative Mann.
No.
Representative Oxendam.
No.
Representative Vincent is not here. Representative McGee. No. Representative McWilliams.
No.
Representative Creechin.
No.
Representative Pimentel. No. Representative Pasha. No. And the chair.
Yes.
That's 13-8-1.
By a vote of 13 to 8, the motion to ITL is adopted.
Okay. Did somebody disagree with the count?
Okay. Will there be a minority report? Representative Somsich will write the minority report. Okay, thank you. I will close the executive session on House Bill 1601.
Forgive me, who's doing the minority report?
Representative Somsich.
Okay, thank you.
And I will open a executive session on House Bill 1621, and I recognize Representative Berejny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I motion that we ITL HB 1621 FM, and I can speak to my motion.
Okay. First, I'll recognize Representative Plett.
I second the motion to ITL.
It has been moved and seconded that we ITL HB 1621. Representative Berejny is recognized to speak to his motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. During the introductory testimony, we heard about the bill sponsor's hometown spending $50,000 to upgrade the library's energy efficiency, and perhaps plans to do the same for their school. We also heard testimony about the ease of installing blown-in insulation. All of those things happen under current law and funding levels. I did not hear testimony on why the current funding amount is inadequate or how much would be adequate to achieve the implied energy efficiency goals. This bill also does not improve the energy efficiency aspects brought up by the bill. There were two things. One is the funding for municipal projects would not increase because that amount is capped to 2 million by RSA 125.0-23 2B. This bill does not increase that cap. And then two, it changes the administration of the energy efficiency programs from electric distribution companies to be Department of Energy and Department of Education. If the laudable goals of these programs is blown in insulation, it's not clear how the Department of Energy or Education will do a better job of administering this program. Furthermore, the Department of Education in their fiscal notes stated they do not need additional funds to implement this program. Presumably, they could therefore implement it today without this extra funding. Finally, my constituents tell me that they want lower electric bills, and this legislation does the exact opposite. Therefore, the primary reason for my ITL motion is that we should not be artificially raising electric rates. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Berejny. Further comments? Representative Mann has a comment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, the cost, the so-called cost for a ratepayer per month for this bill would be about $1 a month. One utility had showed me 65 cents a month. It's just not a lot of money. $1 a month can easily be wiped off the map by buying a LED bulb. And if you really want to save more money, you can wait the 6 weeks or 5 weeks until the LED bulb has paid for itself in savings and electricity. And you can buy another one. And then you can buy a third one. And so on until you run out of sockets. So the idea that this Reggie rebate, that's what I'm calling it, is a complete waste. It's throwing money away that could be used for energy efficiency. It has no beneficial effect for homeowners. It is a complete waste. It is, in fact, the result of a compromise made years ago when there was a bill promoted by Americans for Prosperity, New Hampshire State Director Corey Lewandowski, argued for the elimination of RGGI support from New Hampshire. New Hampshire and other states had joined in this regional greenhouse gas initiative. He apparently not only offended the priorities of New Hampshire citizens, but also perhaps offended the senators with whom he was debating the future of a regional greenhouse gas initiative. At least, anyway, the reputation is that he was making threats, and the senators were very angry. I showed up, this is history that I've researched. I showed up at the scene before I was a rep, going to a House hearing on the bill to get rid of RGGI. And there was a man sitting in the front row, and I was sitting with lots of other people in the back. And after all this, a whole lot of testimony, the chairman, Garrity, said to the man sitting in the front row, who was Corey Lewandowski, "We'll never be able to pass this bill. We'll go with a rebate." So all of us non-members of the legislature were astonished because we had no idea that it was legal to change a bill in midstream from what it was originally to be and turn it into a rebate process of some kind. So it was very difficult to figure out what this was all about. And the chairman then recessed the hearing, the House hearing, for several hours, which succeeded in getting rid of most of the people who are upset about this bill. Anyway, but then the Senate hearing came along, and it turns out At the Senate hearing, this where the Reggie rebate, the compromise idea came. So that apparently this rebate was a compromise made between Lewandowski and the chairman of the Senate and House committees responsible for energy policy. And the compromise was we would stay in Reggie instead of leaving, but we would give away all but $1 of each allowance. This allowance being a unit of payment from the Reggie project. All except $1 for each allowance, give it away back to residents for electric bills as rebates. And again, that rebate was worth about $1 a month now. At the Senate hearing, it appeared that the Lewandowski had been tricked because he was absolutely frantic and
Mr. Chairman, point of
furious.
order.
Please suspend, Representative
have
Mann.
to
What is your point of order?
Well, I don't know what this has to do with anything, and I take exception to hearing disparaging remarks against somebody who isn't here to defend themselves.
I'm just reporting.
Point well taken. Representative Mann, if you could give us your history lesson without making
Yes,
any
okay.
disparaging remarks about
Okay.
persons who
Sorry
are not
about
here
that.
to defend
I
themselves.
apologize. At any rate, the so-called Reggie rebate stayed. In other words, it was stayed in effect. So the dissipation, what basically this did, was to take most of the funding that Reggie was raising and threw it away, if you can call it that. $1 a month really isn't enough to make a difference in a household. And again, a single LED bulb pretty much wipes out that problem anyway. So there really is no need for this Reggie rebate anymore. And I've put several bills in that were reliably vetoed to get rid of that rebate. This bill is just the next attempt to eliminate the rebate, but instead of doing it all in one shot, it does it gradually over several years, by 2028, I think. So that's basically the essence of the bill. My argument is we should not be dissipating money that is available to do energy efficiency, which is very valuable to families, very valuable, for no good reason. Just because of a historical compromise between Americans for Prosperity agent, who, by the way, we never saw again, and the people of New Hampshire. So this is something getting rid of this rebate is something that's very important to do. The bill does it in a gradual way over 7 or 8 years and will be painless. If it is painless for anyone, I will be very happy to give him the gift of an LED bulb and tell him how to parlay that in to replacing all of his bulbs with LED bulbs without spending a penny of his own money. Thank you.
Thank you for your generous offer to help us buy LED bulbs. I would remind you that the argument that this is merely a drop in the bucket is an argument that's made frequently. But today, we spend 4% of every electricity bill, every ratepayer electricity bill, on energy efficiency, and another 3% for the renewable portfolio standard, for a combined total of 7%. When you add to that the net metering charges that go along with that program and charges from Reggie, you're closing in on 10% of an ratepayer's electricity bill being for these programs. It's no longer a drop in the bucket when it becomes 10% of a ratepayer's bill. Is there any further discussion on this bill? Representative Oxenham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you look at the fiscal note, the very last paragraph, the departments indicate the decrease of ratepayer rebates will result in some near-term increase in electricity costs for state, county, and local governments. However, over the long term, increased investment in energy efficiency projects would save ratepayers money. The cost savings for state, county, and local governments, which also would accrue, that's a parentheses addition, those cost savings are indeterminable. The way this energy efficiency projects work, they are guaranteed to have a positive cost-benefit ratio. At a minimum, 2 to 1, often 4 to 1. This is money that makes money. It's an investment that is guaranteed, that is audited, and that produces savings for everyone. For everyone. When we do things more efficiently, what we're cutting is waste. That's what we're losing here, waste. These monies are needed. The other RGGI states around us have demonstrated over 10 years. You look at the figures, which Mike Fitzgerald here from DES has provided us with year in and year out. The numbers demonstrate this is a positive payoff for the ratepayers. Short term, yes, there is an increase in the bill of pennies, but put together, this is hundreds of millions of dollars. This is people in mobile homes who are having fires because of their inefficient heating systems, being able to have livable lives, of students being able to study and perform their homework without their fingers being cold. This is about getting a new refrigerator that runs at 10% the cost of an old refrigerator. Energy efficiency isn't just blowing in insulation. It's across the board. It's a demonstrated, proven winner, and we only hurt ourselves and ratepayers when we cut off the investment funds. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments on or discussion on this bill? Representative Callie Pitts.
I'm going to look at some of the reps, and I want to look at them in the eye. Having sat here and through all these attacks on RGGI over the years, and having us wanted to pull out of it, and this and that and the other thing, I would like to know, one, I appreciated the history lesson and the refreshing my memory, because I sat through those discussions. And I also know that some people on this committee were great proponents of the rebate program. And they were not from my party. I would like to know from somebody, if anybody can tell me, what's the average rebate for a customer? An average customer will be based on a certain amount of kilowatt hours is per month. And what is the savings as people now go and look at the price of fuel? When I look at the price of home fuel, I see it on my way home. There's a advertisement. I go, my gosh, how can anybody, how do you go and say, give me 200 gallons of fuel? And how do we compensate for that? We take it out of the state treasury because we have funds that compensate low-income people for fuel. So if we could save some of that money that we're taking out of state funds to compensate people for fuel, perhaps we would look differently at what this RGGI savings program does and quantify the cost-benefit analysis that we talk so much about against what the average rebate per month to a customer is. I would dare to say they are not even buying a cup of coffee with it. And we're taking out of one hand and giving it out with the other. I think that The medium income person is the one that's suffering. Because we do hand out energy efficiency funds. Maybe we could spread that a little bit more. Fuel assistance funds, if we could spread that out a little bit more, if we had more fuel efficient homes. That's my statement and my question to anyone. What is the average rebate based on the kilowatt hours that we use to do all these figurings? Is it under $1?
Representative Platt is recognized for a comment.
Yes, thank you. What I don't understand is why it makes sense to charge an electric ratepayer a tax, which a Reggie is, and then apply it to an oil furnace. I mean, heating, insulation, which helps oil furnaces, helps kerosene furnaces, and propane. Why not charge that tax on oil, not electricity?
Further comments on this question? Representative Oxenham.
The short answer is that as we move to a clean energy future, we're using clean electricity to produce heat, not using what's now called beneficial electrification. So that it's at the moment, because so many people still are addicted to fossil fuels. Yes, most of those rebates are going to homes that are heated by fossil fuels, but the end goal here, and in the intermediate goal, is to be moving to much more efficient heat pumps and no longer subsidizing. This whole program of fuel assistance just keeps people on fossil fuels. We need to be moving off of that, and to do that, we need to be investing money in more efficient ways of heating homes, building homes in ways that they don't require as much. It's a circular system, and if you can start breaking out of the system and get into the virtuous circle, you're changing the energy system, you're changing the electricity, and so that this program, which you may think at the moment is taking money from fuel oils to electricity, would be an electricity to electricity program.
Thank you. This discussion about throwing more money after energy efficiency programs reminds me of a story that I was going to tell, but on second thought, maybe I won't. Come up to me after the meeting and I'll tell you the story. Representative Bernardi is recognized for a question or a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The issue here of how much this rebate is and what needs to be done with it, is very interesting. But my constituents are outraged at the cost of their electricity bill right now. And they look at that bill and they say, what's this charge? What's this charge? Why am I getting this? What's happening here? And anytime that happens, we need to be sensitive to that. I am very sensitive to that. These charges do not need to be increased when our electric bill is going up.
Representative McGee is recognized for a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the thing that is interesting about the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative is that the accounting is done based on carbon emitters, right? So it's basically a carbon tax. It's not part of the electric bill. The Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative money is money that's rebated to the state based on auctions where they decide how much the carbon is going to cost, and it's how much carbon is emitted in this state. So the argument about the bill, this isn't about the bill. That's not where ratepayers are not paying the money that comes to the state, the millions that come to the state. What Representative Mann's bill is trying to do is take the money that we already receive from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative funding, and instead of giving it back to everybody evenly so that they don't even know that it's there, but we don't have it to use for anything, to use it for what it was intended for, which is to get us ahead on trying to convert to a cleaner system. So it's money that was intended specifically to help us fund something that wouldn't have to come out of people's pockets. And what we're arguing is we want to put pennies back in those pockets rather than use it collectively to lower our demand for everybody and lower costs for everybody. And so we don't get the benefit of that cost multiplier. That's what we're being given. We're being given a chunk of money, and we're frittering it away instead of letting it work for us. So that's the difference between how we view Reggie in the state, or how we've been viewing it, and how other states are using it. So I just wanted to make people understand that you're giving pennies back to people, but you're not taking money away from them by using that money, because that money is coming to the state for the state's use. So the state could put that into energy efficiency and benefit everybody. And I just think we don't always understand how it operates.
Of course, every ratepayer does pay the cost for that because it's bundled into the price of the electricity that they receive when they buy electricity. Representative Mann, your microphone seems to be on all the time. Can you turn it off? You can, okay. Just
Turn it
checking.
back on again as well.
Did you have one more comment you wanted to make? Okay, go ahead.
First of all, if you heat with oil, you're going to be using electricity. You've got to drive the oil into the furnace. You've got to distribute the heat, either whether it's an hot air system or a hot water system. So you use electricity. You will save the effect of energy efficiency on your electric bill will be to lower the electric bill, plain and simple. And I cannot swallow this idea that all this money is being created by our membership in RGGI. We are seriously trying to reduce CO2 pollution, and all this money is made available, and we choose as a state government responsible for what we do, we choose to
I accidentally turned off your mic.
it's absolutely enraging. But I just go back to the point, I'll go back to my earlier point. Every heating system requires electricity, and you'll save plenty of electricity with this money that is now being thrown away. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're going around in circles here. We don't seem to be getting anywhere. So I think I would like to ask the clerk to call the roll. All right, Representative Somstich.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to underscore the fact that, first of all, insulation helps everything. Even mobile home parks have air conditioning that runs on electricity, and an insulated mobile home is a better one than an uninsulated. The funding that is used in various ways from this kind of program includes the funding for low-income energy efficiency measures. And only several years ago, we were told that the backlog, the waiting list for that was almost 10 years. So this idea that we have plenty of funds and we don't need more is just a mythology. We've never been able to service all the people who have asked for that funding. Now, what does that do for the individuals who get the energy efficiency measures? It helps their particular site reduce energy use, but it benefits everybody. When we reduce demand, we reduce transmission costs. The number one factor over the last 10 years increasing on our electricity bill is not the price of energy, it was the price of transmission costs that went up higher in our state than in the neighboring states, for the very reason because we were not doing much about reducing our demand. Transmission reduction helps everyone. business activity that's connected to all the efforts for energy efficiency measures for both insulation as well as for projects that we need, they generate business activity, jobs, something in our economy, and they reduce the amount of fossil fuels we need to import from out of state and out of the country. All these things actually impact everybody, even if you don't make use of the energy program yourself. Indirectly, by doing this, they will drive down your costs. So these measures help everybody, not just the person actually making use of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. During the negotiations that I conducted with the Senate on House Bill 549, which the Senate passed last Thursday on its consent calendar, and that bill will be coming back to us for concurrence next Wednesday or Thursday, whenever it comes up. I'm not sure exactly when it'll appear. I'll have to talk to the clerk about that. But during the course of those negotiations, I asked the Senate if they would consider increasing the percentage of money allocated to low-income customers from 20% to 30%. And the answer I got was no, which surprised me a little bit. But the reasoning behind their answer was that the utilities have told members of the Senate that they can't find people to take those energy efficiency services beyond 20%. So they didn't think they could find ways to spend that money. I found that kind of hard to believe, but I had to accept their word for it. They refused to budge on increasing that percentage from 20 to 30%. So I just point that out. Any further discussion? I think it's time maybe we had a vote. Representative Thomas has a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry to extend this, but I just wanted to comment on the previous representative's comments involving transmission costs and energy costs. It should be known that the cost of your electric bill is the energy cost is approximately 50% of your electric bill. The cost of transmission is approximately 11% of your electric bill. While it is true that the percentage increase of cost of transmission has increased over the years at a higher rate than the cost of your energy, it is still quite a bit lower than the cost of energy. So if you can decrease the cost of your energy by a lot, you could decrease your electric bill. That's all I have to say about that. I will be supporting the recommendation to ITL.
Representative Oxenham.
Thank you very much for your indulgence, Mr. Chair. The point about the increasing electricity costs is not about RGGI or the Systems Benefits Charge. It's about the cost of natural gas. Worldwide, natural gas prices are going up tremendously. We have to pay that because we have not invested in alternatives. We have not taken the road of fuel diversity. And to say that, we have to meet our constituents and say, well, I'm doing something about the electricity bill. When you're working on the 1% and the 3% and the 6%, yes, energy is 50%. And that's the big problem. We have to change our energy system. And to do that, we have funding through RGGI. We're throwing the money away. That money needs to be safeguarded, it needs to be stewarded, it needs to be used for the projects that will pay off for our ratepayers, for our businesses, to grow our economy, not sending $4 to $6 billion out of state every year on fossil fuels, investing it in hydro, wind, solar that are here. These are our New Hampshire industries. Please defeat this bill.
Representative Oxenham is correct about the price of natural gas driving the cost of electricity about 70% of the time, or 70% of the marginal price is set by the price of gas. Earlier today, the locational marginal price was over $300, and right now it's down to about $142 per megawatt hour, and that's largely due to the fact that the temperature has warmed up outside, and we're now using 58% of the gas available to us to generate electricity, whereas this morning we're only losing about 40% gas because there wasn't enough gas available. So Representative Cretion is recognized for a comment.
Thank you, and I promise I'll be brief. I'm really glad that you brought up the bill that just went through the other body, because I wanted to remind everyone that just a month ago, we voted unanimously as a House on the importance of funding New Hampshire Saves. I know we've had lots of conversations in this committee about whether the systems benefits charge is the appropriate mechanism for this. RGGI, to me, seems like it's meant for this. It's meant for energy efficiency. It's meant for, reducing our dependence on carbon. So, whatever your feelings about the SBC, why not use this bulk of money to fund the projects that it's meant for? Thank you.
Okay, I hope we've exhausted this topic and can move on to a vote. We do have another bill that we have to adjudicate here this afternoon, so seeing no more hands up, I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion of ITL on House Bill 1621.
Representative Thomas. Yes. Representative Johnson.
Yes.
Representative Nodder.
Yes.
Representative Murner.
Yes.
Representative Plett votes yes. Representative Berejny.
Yes.
Representative Bernardi.
Yes.
Representative Kimbrels.
Yes.
Representative Ploget.
Yes.
Representative White.
Yes.
Representative Lewicki.
Yes.
Representative Somsich.
No.
Representative Callie Pitts. Representative Mann.
No.
Representative Oxenham.
No.
Representative Vincent's not here. Representative McGee. No. Representative McWilliams.
No.
Representative Cretion.
No.
Representative Pimentel. No. Representative Paschal. No. The chair.
Yes.
I get it as 12-9-1.
Okay, by a vote of 12 to 9, the motion to ITL House Bill 1621 is adopted, and the minority report will be written by
Yes, I think by John Mann.
Representative Mann.
Yeah,
Okay. Remember, Representative, that report is due by end of day, 5 o'clock, close of business tomorrow, Tuesday.
That was my question. Thank you.
Even though we're all going to be here tomorrow. So I guess you have to work on it tonight. Okay? All right. So I'm going to...
Mr. Chairman, can I just make an informational comment here?
Representative Somsich.
I think last time we met at hearings, there was the talk about whether RGGI had issued its annual report about the RGGI program, and I came across a report October 1st dated to this committee, which is the official RGGI annual report. And incidentally, that's a report that went to the Oversight Committee as well at the time.
Okay, thank you. So I'll close the public hearing on House Bill 1621, and I will open a public hearing on House Bill 1644. Exec session. Exec session. Okay. You need a bio break? All right, take a 5-minute bio break. We'll recess the exec session and be right back in 5 minutes.
Those
Okay, 5 minutes are up. Let's move on. I would like to open the the executive session on House Bill 1644, and the chair recognizes Representative Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to preface my comments by saying the subcommittee on 1644 met, and today we voted to recommend interim study on this bill, and so therefore I am making a motion to interim study 1644. I'll follow with comments after the second.
Representative Notter is recognized. It's been moved and seconded that we report HB 1644 as moved to interim study, and Representative Thomas is recognized to speak to the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Because this issue is so complex and additionally emotionally charged, I would like to read my comments because I think I've worded them carefully. The committee was confused, but my comments are that the committee heard testimony that clearly showed people who live near radio frequency emitting towers had various physical and neurological medical issues. Testimony was also heard explaining the 5G technology, which is mainly a marketing term used to indicate the next generation of cell phone and data equipment. It's built on 3 and 4G technology and requires more densely positioned antennas and expanded infrastructure. Industry leaders and world organizations have produced numerous documents pointing to no serious effects in people from this technology. Yet, it cannot be denied certain people are suffering from various illnesses. Although there may be a correlation between those who live near towers who suffer from some form of discomfort, the committee was uncertain as to the causation of such ailments. Despite the fact that there was a 14-month commission that presented a very strong report that pointed to the effects of cumulative radio frequency bombardment, there were equal presentations that pointed to the physics and testing that could dispel this claim. The committee feels there is enough doubt that this bill as presented could not be supported, yet a better compromise could be obtained with additional study. Therefore, the committee recommends that we do interim study to produce perhaps a better recommendation for the next biennium.
Thank you, Representative Thomas. Is there any discussion on this bill, Representative Kelly?
I just have a question for Representative Thomas. You said we met today. We didn't, did we?
Yes, we did. You were absent, but
Was it in the calendar?
it was clearly sent out by Carrie an official notice that we're having a subcommittee today at 12:30. Well, the subcommittee that this afternoon at 12:30 heard 2 presenters, which also presented during the public hearing, so you didn't miss anything. But we did have the vote then, as well.
I saw that, and then I re-looked at the calendar. And the calendar didn't have it listed, so I... Did it have a 10 o'clock? Okay, thank you. 12:30?
Okay, any further
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with our vice chair. And we just had so much conflicting information. It's like, who do you believe? And you can't kill a bill when there's doubt, and you can't pass it either when there's doubt. And we were watching, one person testify, someone behind them shaking their head, and then that person, they switch places, and then the one behind them is shaking their head. It's like, I think our only option is to go to study, just study it some more.
Thank you, Chair. There's an amendment, however, I'd like to add to the bill, stripping pretty much the language about the registry, hoping that would have made it easier to pass. I think we all have that amendment before us. I don't know if it even needs to be acted on if we go to interim study, though, which is something which I think is a very good idea. But my concern is the timing that an interim study would involve. I make a personal choice when I use a device like this. But in giving a green light to the industry, I'm choosing for every citizen in the state of New Hampshire. The Hippocratic Oath says, first, do no harm. I would hope that we could apply that here. And as I said, I support an interim study. But a delay in 5G rollout should have no effect on current technology, 4G technology, and it would provide time to further examine many of these issues, which I too am very confused about. And knowing that these questions on 5G technology is happening in many states, I'm not too worried about being left behind. My greater concern is that by doing nothing, we'll open the state to 5G where it's convenient when we have not even finished the job of eliminating our 4G holes in coverage, or even the broadband fiber coverage, which I'd like to add is working very well in my area. We already have this bill amendment, I said, and one of my fellow representatives here today suggested we could achieve the reasonable moratorium and still explore the many concerns by redrafting an amendment to move up the enactment date, but also place a reasonable sunset clause on the legislation, perhaps a year. In that time, I would hope we'd be able to identify and really get a handle on what we're being asked to legislate. And I would also add that we could also add a further amendment that could address the concerns of ham radio operators, which I know we've all received mail to that effect. So there's many reasons to support and oppose the bill. I myself am not sure exactly where I stand in technology, but one point that concerns me is the legislative overreach that the FCC is imposing on local zoning. Even if I fully support 5G technology, should I do nothing? And wouldn't by doing nothing give my tacit approval to that type of overreach? So I would strongly urge us to consider the complexities of the debate and take sufficient time to do what's best in regards to the citizens of New Hampshire, or at the minimum, as I said before, do no harm. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Partial. Representative Oxenham.
I believe Representative Calipitt had her hand up long before me. That's all right.
Representative Callie Pitts.
Yeah, I was just going to reiterate the original interim study was mine because I felt that I did not have enough knowledge. And I still, at this point, feel that I still don't have enough knowledge or enough clarity to vote to proceed with this bill. But I don't want it to die. And one of the things I would ask the chair is if we do have an interim study, that means if it passes, a study committee would be implemented?
That is correct. In fact, I will ask for volunteers for the study committee before we leave here this afternoon.
And if I could follow, that study committee will meet over the course of, could be the summer, could be this, the rest of this year, to study this issue?
Correct.
Thank you.
I'm concerned that the discussion seems to be focused on sort of an all or nothing. Either we, completely say 5G is, worthwhile and it should go everywhere, or, some people are saying, we're going to be ending 5G in New Hampshire and we're going to fall behind the rest of the country. The commission worked long and hard and came up with a recommendation which is limited. It's about restricting certain kinds of technology in certain kinds of areas. And particularly if we adopt the amendment, which I think would be a benefit because I think the registry has all kinds of issues about it, it would allow us to proceed. Fiber optic is being rolled out in many parts of the state, but there are parts, as we heard this morning, particularly wilderness rescues and also for first responders, where you do need cell coverage. But by moving forward towards fiber optic and having cells fill in the areas that fiber optic cannot reach, we can achieve an optimal situation. So this bill does not ask us to prefer any technology over another. It simply says we have concerns about this one technology in certain areas. We've been told, but it's low frequency and but they have to be 250 feet apart. Well, you get a whole bunch of those things all in a circle and they're all radiating out, and they don't simply radiate in every direction. They go out in a flat line. So you're talking about a circumference at head height. This is a technology which our commission worked hard for long hours, brought in experts, considered this. This is a recommendation that I think we do need to give due respect to the work that was done. Yes, we've had difficulty wrapping our heads around it. I listened to the original public hearing on YouTube. I sat in on the subcommittee meetings. I've listened to this. I've talked to experts outside of this room. It's a difficult issue. But this recommendation is not saying yes to 5G, no to 5G, yes to this. No, it's saying let's limit this in areas where residences, schools, hospitals. Let's make sure that we don't have this technology, which is on top of all the other technologies. And for biological systems, we have to think about cumulative impacts, not simply what is this one doing, but what is this one doing on top of all of the others. So I would suggest that we seriously consider the amendment and we move forward with ought to pass with simply these limited restrictions that came out of the hard work of that commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion, Representative Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This bill, as written, had no chance of passing through the House, in my opinion. And in talking to a senator who was co-sponsor on this bill, admitted it would be a very, very big effort to have it pass in the Senate. I believe that something should pass. If we went forward with this or the amendment, it likely would not pass the House, but even if it did, it would more likely not pass the Senate, and we would be left with nothing. I believe that the interim study paves a way forward for us to come up with better wording and perhaps a compromise, if you will, of something that could get a foot in the door to handle this perceived problem. It may very well be a problem, and to further examine a better way to handle this technology. So interim study, in my book, gives us a chance to improve on this bill and get something done.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate the comments from Representative Thomas. And I would just like to say that, I agree that the commission did good work and that they tried very hard to put what they felt was the prescription or the solution into the bill. But I think we've heard enough testimony from people who have talked about other considerations that were not the focus of that commission that have to be considered. And so from my perspective, whether it's the Department of Safety's concerns, or I heard someone earlier say some hospitals would want the antenna to be close for the first responder and other types of things. There are considerations that we have not deliberated on that would need to be included in the bill for it to really serve everyone. And I think that I would go along with further study to answer some of those questions, because I think we can't, as with many bills, we can't listen to only one constituency and their concerns. We have to understand when we put something in place that it actually works for the people we intend it to work for, and that means we have to talk to them. So I feel there's still stuff that's open.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, there we go. Had to turn it on and off. Like, yeah, exactly. Unplug it and yeah. Yeah. Oh, sure. Okay. I guess what I'm wondering is that we really have it seems to me like there's choice here. Refer it directly to an interim study, or put it out as an OTPA And if it needs further amendments, so be it. But one way would actually put a moratorium on the development of 5G until we have a full handle on it. And by referring it directly to interim study, we would not have that moratorium. So I think the question, what it comes down to, is whether or not we feel comfortable with going ahead with the study when in the end, whatever the results of that study may already be nullified by what the industry's already done. So that's my concern.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I likewise support the interim study motion. Yes, I think so. No, it's okay. I support the interim study motion, and I think this gives us a little opportunity after Representative Abrami did such a thorough job with his commission and trying to get a handle on this. But for us as a committee to step back a little bit and consider that there is very powerful business interests involved here who are pushing this thing. It's part of a marketing campaign. And you know, I understand that the Department of Safety is connected, and so are EMTs and others who use this network for safety purposes. But that's not the real business going on. The business of this 5G is going to be broader to everybody. And before that gets rolled out, I think we need to be cautious and make sure that the best interests of the residents of New Hampshire are served. And I think expanding broadband, which had huge support from both sides of the aisle, that everyone should get high-speed broadband, this issue with 5G seems to divert our attention from that. And I think it would be very beneficial if we make sure that that doesn't get sidelined as part of this process. Thank you.
Representative Callie Pitts.
I want to say that I want to dovetail a little bit on what Representative Somsich said. It's high speed and affordable was what was left out of that remark. And I do believe, and this was my concern at the very get-go, we are not going to put a moratorium on anything. We, at this point, I believe, do not have the authority to either say yay or nay. You can do it or you can't. And we don't even have that ability through the PUC because that was given up. So I think that interim study is the best way to find out how we proceed, and indeed if we can proceed, and where we go from here. And I think that in the meantime, we need to educate people as to what's going on. That 5G, what it is and how it works. Thank you.
Hello? Okay, now it's working. Any more comments on this question? Representative Murner, did you have a comment? Oh, okay. Okay, seeing none, I'd ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion of interim study for House Bill 1644.
Okay. Representative
Yes.
Thomas. Representative Johnson.
Yes.
Representative Nodder.
Yes.
Representative Murner.
Yes.
Representative Platt votes yes. Representative Berejny.
Yes.
Representative Bernardi.
Yes.
Representative Cambrels. Yes. Representative Ploget.
Yes.
Representative White.
Yes.
Representative Lewicki.
Yes.
Representative Somsich.
Yes.
Representative Callie Pitts. Yes. Representative Mann.
Yes.
Representative Oxenham.
No.
Representative Vincent's not present. McGee, Representative McGee. Yes. Representative McWilliams.
No.
Representative Creechin.
No.
Representative Pimentel. Yes. Representative Paschal.
No.
And the chair.
Yes.
18 to 3 to 1. 17 to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1741, you're correct. It's hard because it's on 2 pages on my sheet.
Okay. By a vote of 17 to 4, the committee will recommend that House Bill 1644 go to interim study. I want to thank you all for your careful attention to this complicated subject and for all the work you've done.
Do we
to
have a
make it happen.
minority report on that?
Does anyone want to submit a minority report?
I think Representative Partial will do
Representative
that.
Partial will submit a minority report. Now, before we go home, I know everybody's anxious to get out there and try to beat potential snow or rain, but
It's too late. Snowing.
snowing already? Okay. All right. Well, in that case, why don't we just stay here for a couple hours? So I'll tell you the story after the cameras go off. But, before we do anything else, I would like to solicit names of volunteers who would serve on the subcommittee that will pursue the interim study for this bill. So Representative Lewicki, Representative Cretion, Representative Partial, Representative Nodder, Representative White, Representative Callie Pitts, Representative Thomas, Representative Berejny. Anyone else? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That'll be a pretty good study committee. So I'll look forward to putting that together.
Aren't you going to be on it too?
No, this is what we're talking about right now is the study committee that will complete the interim study of this question and make a recommendation. There are 2 recommendations you can make coming out of interim study. One is this subject is not recommended for future legislation. And the other is this subject is recommended for future legislation, and you can describe what that future legislation might look like. So this committee of 8 people will meet. I will choose one of you to be the chair, probably Representative Thomas, and that person will call meetings at his or her convenience in conjunction with, in consultation with the rest of the folks on the committee, and you guys will start meeting. It probably won't happen until after the close of business on May 26th, but it could happen before that, but it probably won't. Representative Partial.
And that's because I'm the rookie here. This interim study is dependent upon this being approved by the full House, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure.
Okay. But with a vote of 17 to 4, I suspect it will be. So, all right. So I'm going to close the executive session on House Bill 1644 and remind everyone that you need to be back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for 5 public hearings, the final 5 public hearings that we will conduct for House bills, right? For the House bills for this session year. So we'll see you all at 9 o'clock tomorrow. Please drive carefully tonight and tomorrow morning. And thank you, everyone, for your hard work.